Chapter 79. You don't need to comfort me, it's okay. Yu Qianqiu walked to the side, took out a middle-grade spirit stone, sat down cross-legged, and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body to repair his slightly damaged divine sense and true qi. Yan Zixia silently stood on the side, no longer saying anything. She put herself in his shoes. If she had not built her foundation and finally got a set of spirit herbs to refine a foundation-building pill, but then failed, one could imagine how she would feel. After restoring his body to its best state, Yu Qianqiu stood up and stretched his arms and chest, relaxing his muscles and bones. Under Yan Zixia's attentive gaze, he took out another set of spirit herbs from his storage pouch. He has more. Yan Zixia was slightly stunned, and immediately shouted, "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Yan Zixia explained, "I don't mean anything else, leave your set of spirit herbs first. I'll go ask great-grandma, let her help you refine it, I think with her help, the success rate must be higher." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, No, I think it's better not to let her know about this. Failure is the mother of success, failure is a habit. Isn't it just a set of spirit herbs, it's okay. In his heart, he thought, damn, if it wasn't because I really can't find a place to refine pills, I don't even want to tell you. If that old granny knows I have spirit herbs so soon, who knows what the consequences will be. Yan Zixia didn't think so. The scene of Yu Qianqiu kneeling for the spirit herb seed was still vivid in her mind. It showed how important this spirit herb was to him. She wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. The furnace was hot. Yu Qianqiu threw the spirit herbs in, waved his hand to cover the furnace, and used his divine sense to control the spirit herbs to separate and refine. When the dirt-dispelling grass paste was separated, he concentrated and was extremely careful. Unfortunately, his divine sense wasn't strong enough, and he failed again. If it wasn't for the pill recipe requiring the 8 spirit herbs to be refined at the same time, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to fuse them one by one. Biting her lips, Yan Zixia silently watched as Yu Qianqiu cleaned the ashes from the furnace and retrieved spiritual stones to recover his divine sense and true qi. She couldn't help but blame him for not listening to her advice. When Yu Qianqiu took out the 3rd set of spiritual grass, Yan Zixia's lips parted slightly in surprise. This was only possible for a great sect like the supporting Immortal Island. If it was any other sect, it would not be easy to gather 3 sets of spirit herbs to refine the foundation establishment pill. One must know that a set of spirit herbs to refine the foundation establishment pill could be sold for a lot of spirit stones in the cultivation world. If the conditions weren't right, one could imagine the consequences of trying to forcefully concoct the pellet. After failing again and again, Yu Qianqiu was starting to get a headache. He had already destroyed 10 sets of spiritual herbs, but he couldn't even fuse the dirt-dispelling grass. Although he still had 90 sets of spiritual herbs to back him up, he still couldn't make it. He clenched his teeth and tried 2 more sets of spiritual herbs. Every time, he almost failed. Thinking about the process of concoction, he realized that there was a problem with his mental state. He was impatient, nervous, excited, and his mental state was very unstable. His divine sense was originally not strong enough. Coupled with these factors that affected his control over his divine sense, he was afraid that this was the reason why he failed. Since he found the source of the problem, he would naturally have a solution. At least, that was what he thought. He took out the spirit stones and slowly absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Then, he slowly recovered his true qi and divine sense. After recovering, he was not in a hurry to concoct the pellet. Instead, he relaxed his mental state and entered a state of emptiness. Yan Zixia had been paying attention to him. She didn't know why he needed such a long time to recover this time. After sitting cross-legged for a long time, Yu Qianqiu slowly let out a breath. He stood up and quietly walked to the front of the furnace. There was no expression on his face. He casually took out a set of spiritual herbs from his storage bag and threw them into the furnace. Then, he closed the furnace lid. With the assistance of the previous dozen times, his movements were very smooth. His divine sense controlled the spiritual herbs and refined them. The paste of the dirt-dispelling grass was once again divided into 8 parts. However, he was not in a hurry to fuse them. He carefully felt the 16 balls of paste. After confirming that there was no problem with his mental state, he calmly controlled the 8 drops of paste to the other 8 balls of spiritual herbs. His divine sense was not strong enough to drive things. He could only stir the airflow in the furnace to drive it. This was the difference between reaching the foundation building stage and not reaching the foundation building stage. However, it also consumed more energy and true chi. With a calm mental state, there was really an effect. The 8 drops of dirt-dispelling grass were smoothly integrated into the 8 spiritual herbs. The 8 balls of chaos were also a lot bigger. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but become excited. His mood fluctuated. The 8 spiritual herbs floating in the furnace also swayed. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He immediately calmed down. The 16 balls became 8. It was much easier for his divine sense to control them. The next step was to remove the impurities in the spiritual herbs. After the 8 balls of paste were injected with the dirt-dispelling grass, they changed. The original paste gradually became clear. His divine sense controlled the airflow produced by the high temperature and spun the 8 spiritual herbs. As the spinning speed became faster and faster, impurities were thrown out. Seeing that the 8 balls of paste were about to turn into clear liquids of different colors, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that his true qi was insufficient. Controlling the airflow with his divine sense at such a high speed consumed too much true qi. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu groaned in pain in his heart. If he had known this would happen, he would have grabbed 2 handfuls of spirit stones. The step of removing the impurities was about to succeed, but his true qi was insufficient. How could he have the energy to split his divine sense to take out spirit stones from Utopia? He could only blame himself for not having enough experience. He could only watch as the 8 balls of spiritual liquid worshipped each other. He retracted his divine sense and opened the lid. This time, not only was there a ball of black ash, there was also a fragrant mist. Yu Qianqiu felt his heart ache. Yan Zixia could also see that Yu Qianqiu had improved compared to before. Although she had never concocted a foundation-building pill before, her cultivation level was still there. She wanted to help, but Yu Qianqiu wouldn't let her. He stubbornly insisted on doing it herself. His body had recovered to its best state. Learning from his previous lesson, he took out a few handfuls of high-grade spirit stones and put them on his belt so that he could easily get them when he needed them. When he felt that his true qi was insufficient again, Yu Qianqiu quickly took out a high-grade spirit stone from his waist and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body to replenish his true qi. After using 2 high-grade spirit stones in a row, the 8 balls of chaos finally turned into crystal-clear liquids of different colors. They floated in the furnace, looking very beautiful. His divine sense controlled the airflow and rearranged the essence of the 8 spiritual herbs. The gold chaos grass was placed in the middle. Although the medicinal effect of the spiritual herbs was magical, it was also very overbearing for the human body. Not to mention that taking several spiritual herbs at once was very difficult for the human body to bear. The role of the gold chaos grass was to neutralize the medicinal effect and prevent the different effects of the spiritual herbs from conflicting. The airflow rushed to the gold chaos grass spiritual liquid, divided it into 7 parts and smoothly merged with the other spiritual liquids. Then the liquid of the 100-year-old ginseng and the 100-year-old lingji was adjusted and merged into a large bowl. These 2 were good things to replenish the vitality. A large ball of nourishing spiritual liquid was again divided into 5 groups and merged with the remaining 5 spiritual liquids. It was to supplement the body's vitality when the medicinal effect of the spiritual herbs played a role in the body, so that the body would not be damaged. After doing this, Yu Qianqiu did not dare to be careless. Now it was the most critical moment. He once again absorbed a spirit stone to replenish his true qi and restore his divine sense. After adjusting the state of his body, except for the spirit-gathering grass, the other 4 spiritual herbs rushed together. The airflow stirred them into a ball until they were mixed evenly. Then, they were quickly divided into 10 equal parts and placed in the center of the furnace to be baked. His divine sense tried its best to control the high temperature in the furnace and concentrate on the 10 fist-sized liquid. Moreover, he also had to maintain the 10 balls of liquid to turn evenly. To maintain such control, the consumption of true qi and divine sense was like running water. Yu Qianqiu was miserable. Fortunately, he had the foresight to insert a pile of upper-grade spirit stones into his belt. When he felt a little exhausted, he would immediately take out a spirit stone to absorb and replenish it. Yan Zixia, who was on the side, was dumbfounded. She had never seen someone refine pills like this. It was simply piling up spiritual herbs and spirit stones. In just 3 months, he had probably used more than 2,000 upper-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to more than 20 million lower-grade spirit stones. Anyway, as the eldest miss of the 100 Flowers Palace, she had never used so many spirit stones. The dozens of spiritual herbs were even more frightening. Even a big sect like the Supporting Immortals Island could barely gather 10 sets every 3 years. Yu Qianqiu had taken out 14 sets so far. Moreover, she did not know whether he had more in his storage bag. Looking at his current state, he might really have to refine a furnace for him. Yan Zixia speechlessly shook her head and smiled bitterly. No wonder he wanted to refine it himself. With such a solid foundation, not only could he improve his alchemy skills, but he could also pile it up. Where did he get this thing that was comparable to the strength of a sect? The 10 fist-sized liquid gradually became dim from the beginning. Their volume also shrunk by half, and they were still shrinking. When they were the size of an egg, his divine sense quickly moved the spiritual liquid of the spirit-gathering grass to the top of the furnace. It was evenly divided into 10 parts, corresponding to the 10 balls that had just formed the pill. As they rotated at a uniform speed, the spiritual liquid of the spirit-gathering grass adhered to the surface evenly. The function of the spirit-gathering grass was to lock the medicinal efficacy of the spirit pill and prevent it from evaporating. For a foundation-building pill, even a slight loss of medicinal efficacy would be enough to affect the success or failure of a cultivator who wanted to build his foundation. After doing all this, the last step was to roast it and shape it. There should not be any more major problems. With 10 foundation-building pills in front of him, even if Yu Qianqiu could control himself, he could not help but feel a little excited. Chapter 80. The 10 foundation-building pills in the furnace shook slightly. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Since ancient times, there were many examples of people failing on the verge of success. He was secretly alarmed. He quickly calmed his mind and carefully took care of the 10 treasures. His cultivation level was not high. Refining pills in the aura refining realm was already a forced move, but it was not comparable to Ma Zhugu's abnormal cultivation level. Ma Zhugu's divine sense could freely control the pills in the furnace even though she was by the sea. Not long after, a wisp of green smoke rose from the top of the furnace, and the fragrance of pills overflowed from the furnace. Done. Although Yan Zixia knew it was almost done, she was still a little surprised. She had taken foundation-building pills before, so she was familiar with this fragrance. It was the fragrance of foundation-building pills, and it seemed to be stronger than the foundation-building pill she had taken before. She secretly pondered, I wonder how many pills he can refine in this furnace. Rise! Yu Qianqiu shouted. His voice was so excited that it changed its tone. As he split the furnace lid with his palm, he quickly withdrew his divine sense. Several purple shadows rushed out of the furnace due to the oppressive airflow in the furnace. Yu Qianqiu quickly jumped up and pulled up the hem of his gown. The 10 purple shadows were all wrapped in it. After landing on the ground, he opened up the hem, and a tempting smell hit his face. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He couldn't help but laugh, fresh out of the furnace. Fresh out of the furnace, foundation building pills. I've succeeded. That smug look on his face was extremely annoying. He couldn't be blamed for being like this. After pursuing it day after day, anyone would be excited when it was realized. Yan Zixia quickly walked over and pulled open her clothes. Inside were a bunch of shiny purple pills. After counting them, she cried out in surprise, 10 pills. She couldn't help but stretch out her slender fingers and pinch one. She could still feel the slight heat in her hand. It was a lot. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. Its color and smell were very pure. There was a faint layer of purple light on the outside of the pill. Obviously, it was a very successful furnace of pills. Yan Zixia was surprised, but a trace of envy appeared on her face. Even with her cultivation level, even if she was given more than 10 sets of 9 scented spiritual grasses to concoct foundation building dawn, she wouldn't be able to guarantee that she would be able to concoct 10 foundation building dawn in one furnace. Once she left the furnace, there would definitely be a few useless foundation building dawn. Not to mention, she didn't even know the specific steps and methods to concoct foundation building dawn. When the elixirs came out of the furnace just now, she clearly saw that there were 10 elixirs, no more, no less. Now that they were right in front of her, there was indeed not a single useless elixir. Qianqiu, who taught you this alchemy method? Yan Zixia asked as she put down the pill in her hand. Yu Qianqiu was looking at the pills and smiling foolishly. He didn't expect that he could concoct a furnace of pills with just a dozen sets of spiritual herbs. He had originally planned to concoct a furnace of pills with just a few dozen sets. It was really too unexpected. When he heard what she said, he put the medicinal pills into his storage bag, rubbed his nose and said with a smile, "I figured it out myself. Didn't you see that I spent more than a dozen sets of spiritual plants to test it out?" "Ah. You figured it out yourself." Yan Zixia didn't suspect that he was lying, and said anxiously, "Qianqiu, quickly memorize the steps and methods of your alchemy. You mustn't forget them." Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and asked, "Why? Don't you know? Although we use the same spiritual plants, the steps of alchemy are different for every sect and sect. A good recipe is a priceless treasure." Yan Zixia poured out everything she knew. When he heard that, Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. The alchemy sect's pill recipe Jade Disc was indeed not ordinary. Any random foundation building pill recipe could be treated as a treasure. That brat Lu Jingguang's castration was worth it. However, he didn't think about it. Every single pill recipe in that pill recipe Jade Disc, every single step and method of alchemy, were the crystallization of countless generations of the alchemy sect's painstaking efforts. If it weren't for that, with his loser standards, how could he possibly concoct a furnace of 10 pills with 100% success? Even if he did succeed, it would be strange if he didn't end up mostly crippled. It seemed like he hadn't seen the scene of crippled pills yet, so he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yu Qianqiu wasn't prepared to tell her about the pill recipe yet. He nodded solemnly, and said, "N. Zixia, thank you for your reminder. I understand, I'll think about it carefully now." "Oh right, Zixia, can you get me something to eat? I'm a little hungry." He was wholeheartedly immersed in alchemy, and indeed hadn't eaten a drop of water for 2 days. "Okay, I'll go get it for you now." Before Yan Zixia left, she didn't forget to remind him, "You must remember this." After she left, Yu Qianqiu mumbled, "Remember my ass. I've remembered it since a year ago. Now I should think about what to do." I don't know if this girl's mouth is tight or not. No, 10 foundation building dawn is really not enough. Aside from myself, there's still Guan Yu, Chen Feng, and little Tian. In the future, there might be even more lackeys waiting for me to subdue. Not to mention, I don't know how many foundation building dawn I'll use to successfully build my foundation. It seems like I can't be in a hurry to build my foundation right now. Yan Zixia flew back and forth by herself, so she came back very quickly. Not only did she bring the barbecued meat that Yu Qianqiu liked to eat, she also brought a bottle of wine. She seemed to be congratulating him. After Yu Qianqiu ate and drank to his heart's content, he patted his stomach and said, "I've already memorized it. Now, let's confirm the effect." With a successful experience, it would save a lot of time and effort to concoct again. When the furnace of foundation building dawn came out, Yan Zixia was speechless. Unexpectedly, there were 10 foundation building dawn in each furnace, and there wasn't a single waste dan. This success rate was a bit too high. Even if it was her great-grandmother, she might not necessarily be able to do it. After more than 10 furnaces, because he had been concocting the same kind of dan, he was already familiar with the things he needed to pay attention to. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. When he had concocted the 50th batch, he had a fixed pattern. The control of the spiritual liquid inside the furnace was as easy as blowing off dust. He also knew how to control the heat flow inside the furnace by borrowing force. A furnace of dawn came out without using a single spirit stone. If other people saw this, who would believe that this was a chi refining stage disciple concocting dawn? However, no one could be like him, using a pile of precious spiritual herbs and high-grade spirit stones to practice. Towards the end, when a furnace of foundation building dawn came out, there was no joy or worry on his face. He was already numb, as if concocting foundation building dawn was as easy as eating a meal. Even Yan Zixia, who was watching from the side, was a bit numb. After concocting 100 batches of spiritual herbs, a full 10 days had passed. During this time, one furnace of dawn was destroyed, and it was due to his carelessness. Counting the 100 batches of spiritual herbs, he had actually succeeded in concocting 96 batches. Each batch contained 10 dawn. He had already concocted 960 foundation building dawn. The earth fire that had been burning under the furnace for more than 10 days was finally sealed. Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and exhaled, saying, "I'm done." Yan Zixia had also forgotten to count how many furnaces he had concocted. She walked over and asked, "You're not concocting anymore?" To be honest, watching someone do the same thing every day, knowing the result, was really boring. "I'm not concocting anymore. I've already memorized the method. It seems that the concocting method I figured out is still a so-so." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yan Zixia rolled her eyes at him. She didn't care what he said. She had already thought it through. No matter how good the recipe was, she was too embarrassed to ask for it. If she asked for it, and he didn't give it to her, wouldn't that be too embarrassing? After all, it was not an ordinary pill recipe. Even if he gave it to her, she would owe him a huge favor. How was she supposed to repay him in the future? Chapter 81. The air was fresh, the sky was blue, the grass was green, the river was flowing, and Yan Zixia's figure was curvy. Along the way, Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood. He had more than 900 foundation building pills on him. He believed that no matter how bad his aptitude was, he could still succeed in building his foundation. "Qianqiu." "Yes. Are you going to prepare to build your foundation when you go back?" Yan Zixia asked. Yu Qianqiu answered without hesitation, "Yes." "Do you still remember that you owe me a song?" Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I remember. I've been busy concocting pills recently. After I build my foundation, I'll definitely think of a song for you." He didn't really want to give her a song at that time and was just perfunctory. Now, he couldn't think of a suitable song for her. After walking for a while, Zixia asked again, "Do you want me to protect you when you build your foundation?" "Ha! No need. I'll just find a quiet place to hide." Yu Qianqiu refused. He also knew that no one could disturb him when he was building his foundation. Otherwise, he might go berserk. However, there was probably no safer place than Utopia in this world. He didn't even tell Chu Ping about that place, and it was not convenient to tell her now. Seeing that he refused, Yan Zixia bit her lip and didn't say anything. In his previous life, Yu Qianqiu was also a person who often visited flowers. Naturally, he could see that she was unhappy because of his refusal. He leaned over without hesitation, raised his hand, and slapped her perky buttocks. "Ah!" Yan Zixia screamed. She was accidentally attacked by the bad guy again. She blushed and quickly ran to the side. The assailant laughed proudly. After returning to the mulberry garden, the couple went back to their respective homes. When he returned to the house, the scene in front of him made Yu Qianqiu slightly stunned. Furong was actually covered with a quilt and lying on the bed with her back facing the outside. It was a bit unbelievable. Usually, even at night, she would sit cross-legged on the bed and cultivate. "Marshall and Furong. Are you alright?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Furong didn't say anything. Her head was also covered with the quilt, so she couldn't see what was wrong with her. Raising his hand, he wanted to pull the blanket away to take a look, but after thinking about it, he gave up. No matter how ugly she was still a woman. She was kind enough to let him stay with her, but he was pulling her blanket. What was going on? "Marshall uncle, are you asleep?" Yu Qianqiu shouted again. Hibiscus still didn't respond. It was a little strange. Yu Qianqiu shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He would go back to build his foundation first. He would come back to ask after he succeeded. He disappeared from his bed. If there was anyone that Guan Yu and Chen Feng missed the most during this period of time, it would undoubtedly be their boss, Yu Qianqiu. He had been gone for more than 10 days. There was no news at all. The two of them were worried sick. Even if he couldn't refine the foundation building pill, he should at least come back and say hello. "We don't blame you. In any case, there are plenty of spiritual herbs. You just have to continue working hard." The two of them lay on the bamboo pavilion stone platform listlessly. They didn't have the energy to do anything. The days of waiting were so painful. In the distance, Little Red Rabbit and Bai Suzhen wandered about in the sea of flowers. "Boss is back." Chen Fang's eyes lit up, and he stood up. "Where?" Guan Yu's back was facing the outside, so he didn't see it for a moment. When he turned around, he saw Yu Qianqiu walking over from the forest listlessly just like them. Guan Yu and Chen Feng looked at each other, a bad premonition spreading in their eyes. The pill concoction this time was probably fraught with grim possibilities. Otherwise, they wouldn't have seen boss like this. From the moment Yu Qianqiu appeared, Bai Suzhen already knew. Looking from afar, she couldn't help but frown. The former's dejected appearance fell into her eyes. She patted the little colt and said, "Red Rabbit, let's go back." "Boss. You're back." Guan Yu and Chen Feng walked out of the courtyard made of bamboo and welcomed him together. They both wanted to ask how the pill concoction was going, but when they saw boss's appearance, they couldn't bring themselves to ask. The two of them hugged him and sat down in the bamboo pavilion. Yu Qianqiu rested his elbow on the stone platform, his fingers pinching his forehead silently. Not long after, Bai Suzhen leisurely walked into the courtyard and asked, "What's wrong?" "Yeah. Boss, what's wrong?" "Boss, if there's anything, just say it. We're not outsiders here." When Bai Suzhen opened her mouth, the two of them couldn't wait to ask about it, but they just had to avoid the thing they wanted to know the most. How was the foundation building pill going? Yu Qianqiu secretly laughed in his heart. Let's see how long you can hold it in. He waved his hand at them and said, nothing much, I'm just really tired these few days. I'll be fine after some rest. After dilly-dallying for a while, Chen Feng finally couldn't help but ask, Boss, have you concocted the foundation building pill? Yu Qianqiu straightforwardly said, I have. Guan Yu's eyes lit up, and he asked, how's the concoction going? Yu Qianqiu indifferently said, nothing much. Hearing this, the two of them's expressions darkened, and Chen Feng said regretfully, did they all fail? What did you say? Yu Qianqiu's beady eyes widened, and he said, have you ever seen me fail? Every time he encountered such a situation, he would always think of a way to increase his boss's prestige without holding back. Bai Suzhen, who had always been a bystander, was the clearest about this. She knew what he was going to do, so she turned around and smiled. Guan Yu and Chen Feng looked at each other, and they instantly became excited. The former stuttered, B-boss, where's the foundation? Foundation building pill. Where is it? This was the thing that Guan Yu had been looking forward to the most since he was chased out of Fuxian Island, so how could he not be excited? Chen Feng, on the other hand, never thought that this day would really come. Two useless things, a mere foundation building pill can make you so excited, how are you going to do great things with me in the future? Calm down, you have to be calm, you have to be as calm as me, understand? Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. As he spoke, he took out 2 purple pills from his storage bag, and the fragrance of the pills instantly filled the bamboo pavilion. Even Bai Suzhen couldn't help but take a few more glances. The two of them repeatedly admitted their mistakes, yes, yes, yes. However, their eyes were fixed on the 2 purple pills. Guan Yu even cried out in surprise, it's really the foundation building pill. He had taken 3 before, but unfortunately, he didn't succeed in building his foundation, so he naturally recognized it. The 2 quail-sized foundation building pills were pinched in his palm, and he put them away. Guan Yu and Chen Feng were stunned, they didn't know what boss meant, could it be that he didn't want to give them to them? Yu Qianqiu held the foundation building pills with his hands behind his back, and said with a serious expression, don't worry, I will definitely give you these foundation building pills. Also, I will give you a choice. I will give each of you 1 foundation building pill, if you are willing to leave, I will let you go, and I will even beg my sister to return your natal primordial spirits, and from then on, we will have nothing to do with each other. There is another choice, I will still give you the foundation building pills, you can choose to stay, but from then on, you have to sincerely treat me as boss, and follow my orders. Think about it. Guan Yu, I know you have always been unconvinced by me as boss, you go first. The two of them looked at each other, they didn't know why Yu Qianqiu would say this. Bai Suzhen also looked over in shock. After a moment of silence, it was Chen Feng who took a step forward, bowed, and said, from now on, Chen Feng will only follow boss's orders, I will not have any other thoughts. If I go against this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me. When he first arrived, he really didn't like Yu Qianqiu, but after being fooled a few times, he naturally didn't know that he was being fooled, so he already had some sort of blind worship for Yu Qianqiu, which was why he swore such a heavy oath. Yu Qianqiu nodded his head in satisfaction, then turned his gaze to Guan Yu. Guan Yu hesitated. He was much older than Chen Feng, so his eyes were naturally more mature. Actually, it didn't matter if he stayed, and it didn't matter if he sincerely treated Yu Qianqiu as boss, the key was that the temptation of the natal primordial spirit was too great. At least from now on, he wouldn't be controlled by others at all times. But with 1 foundation building pill, could he really build his foundation successfully? If he couldn't build his foundation successfully, what could he do even if he left? On the contrary, since Yu Qianqiu could successfully refine it the first time, he could refine it a second and a third time. What this place didn't lack the least were spiritual herbs. Most importantly, even if he wanted to leave, would Yu Qianqiu really let him go? Wasn't he afraid that he would leak the secret here? Thinking of this, Guan Yu was a little annoyed. Chen Feng, this be asterisk starred. So be it. Why did he have to make such a heavy oath? It should be known that cultivators, regardless of their cultivation, were different from ordinary people in the secular world. Once they made an oath, if they went against it, it would come true. But since he had already made an oath, it wouldn't be right if he didn't. After hesitating for a while, Guan Yu gritted his teeth, bowed, and said, "From now on, Guan Yu will only follow boss's orders, I will not have any other thoughts. If I go against this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me." "Good!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. He turned his back to the two of them and raised his head to laugh. Suddenly, he turned around and glanced at the two of them coldly. His eyes were cold and emotionless, and a decisive and domineering aura surged out from his body. Under that aura, Guan Yu and Chen Feng actually subconsciously took a step back. The two of them were shocked. Bai Suzhen didn't blink. This was the first time she saw Yu Qianqiu with such an aura. In the blink of an eye, it was as if he had changed into a different person. It was as if she didn't recognize him. She could be considered to have seen the world. This kind of aura could only be emitted by someone who had been in a high position for a long time and was iron-blooded and murderous. It wasn't something that could be faked. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the two of them coldly and finally landed on Guan Yu. He stared for a long time until the latter felt a little scared. Then, he slowly said, "One day, the two of you will be proud of your choice." Chen Feng's mouth opened slightly and he swallowed with difficulty. He never thought that boss had such a side to him. He was really unfathomable. The admiration in his heart couldn't help but increase a little. Just when the few of them were shocked, Yu Qianqiu suddenly returned to his usual smiling expression, making Guan Yu and Chen Feng very uncomfortable. Yu Qianqiu took out his hand from behind his back and spread out the two foundation-building pills in his palm. He smiled at the two of them and said, "Each of you can take one. I wish the two of you succeed in building your foundation soon." Chapter 82. The two of them were still not used to his fickleness. They nervously took a foundation-building pill each and bowed together. "Thank you, boss." Yu Qianqiu smiled. "What are you thanking me for? Let's quickly find a place to build our foundation." The two of them excitedly returned to their respective rooms in the bamboo house. As he watched the two of them leave, Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If someone had really chosen to leave just now, he would not have hesitated to kill them. Apart from being afraid of revealing his secret, he could strongly feel that after passing the foundation building stage, their future path would be different. He could guarantee that the two of them would definitely succeed in building their foundation because he had enough foundation building pills in his hands. However, he did not need a disloyal subordinate. With the small interlude just now, if the two of them failed to build their foundation, he would once again take out foundation building pills for them. Every time they failed, he would give them another foundation building pill, until they succeeded. He believed that repeated efforts would be more touching than a one-time effort. This was also the reason why he did not tell the two of them that he had a lot of foundation building pills. If he wanted to become a real boss, the necessary strategy was unavoidable. It was not to target someone. Returning to his senses, he took out a foundation building pill. With a light leap, he simply sat cross-legged on the stone platform. He turned his head towards Bai Suzhen in the courtyard and smiled. He opened his mouth and swallowed the foundation building pill. The pill tasted a little sweet and bitter. Before he could recover from the taste, it had already slipped into his stomach. He slowly closed his eyes and began to circulate his chi. Not long after, his body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning. A warm current surged from his abdomen to his surroundings, rushing to every part of his body. The strength was very strong and very overbearing. The Dan was refined by Yu Qianqiu himself. He knew that the effect of the forging tendon grass in the building foundation Dan had begun to take effect. The effect of the forging tendon grass was to destroy and expand the tendons and veins in the body. It could be regarded as one of the most important spirit herbs in the building foundation Dan. Equally important was the ice spirit seed. It had the effect of repairing the tendons and veins. In the beginning, it felt like a hot current, but soon, it felt like a volcano was about to erupt. Wave after wave of the foundation building pellet rushed into every part of his body. It was so painful that he wanted to die. After a while, Yu Qianqiu felt like his soul had left his body. He didn't expect that the medicinal effect of the foundation building pellet would be so overbearing. If he waited until the medicinal effect of the whole foundation building pellet completely dissolved, he really didn't know how he would be able to endure it. If he could see his appearance now, he would definitely be shocked. The pores all over his body began to ooze black mucus. It was the first time for Bai Suzhen to see a person take a Dan to build his foundation. The painful expression on Yu Qianqiu's face made her frown slightly. She was a demon, not a human, so she didn't need to take the Dan to improve her cultivation. However, demon cultivators also had their own way of suffering to improve their cultivation, which was no less than that of humans. Yu Qianqiu really felt that he couldn't endure it anymore. He had already entered a semi-conscious state. Suddenly, a warm current went straight up his back and rushed into his brain. His muddle-headed brain instantly became sober. The medicinal effect of the heart-guarding orchid had taken effect. It was still okay if he was not sober. Once he was sober, he could clearly feel the pain his body was enduring. At this time, he could no longer operate his cultivation to dissolve the Dan. All of his true qi had retracted back into his dantian. The tendons and veins in his body had been destroyed by the forging tendon grass, so he could no longer operate his cultivation normally. He could only rely on the building foundation Dan to operate on his own. Yu Qianqiu secretly smiled bitterly. His body felt like it was being roasted by fire and cut by thousands of knives. Because of the effect of the heart-guarding orchid, he could endure all of this with a clear mind. He estimated that he wouldn't be able to stop for at least 2 or 3 hours. Just when he was in so much pain that he wanted to scream, he didn't know how much time had passed. A cool feeling flowed from his abdomen to all parts of his body. The ice spirit seed that Yu Qianqiu had been looking forward to for a long time finally took effect. The broken tendons and veins began to repair. Wherever the cool feeling went, the tendons and veins gradually recovered. The heat in his body began to disperse. The places that had been cut by thousands of knives also felt like being gently caressed by a breeze. The comfortable feeling was indescribable. Yu Qianqiu felt so comfortable that he wanted to moan. Time passed slowly. What followed was the medicinal effect of the diamond fruit. It brought a slight electric shock numbness. The numbness spread along the tendons and veins, stabilizing the damaged and repaired tendons and veins. This feeling was neither painful nor uncomfortable. It was thousands of times better than the tyranny of the tendon-forging grass. When all of the sensations receded like the tide, Yu Qianqiu felt a little drowsy. His whole body, including his spirit, felt very tired. He wanted to sleep. The destruction of his body and the reconstruction of it had consumed too much of his yuan qi. Fortunately, the 100-year ginseng and 100-year ganoderma contained in the pill were great for replenishing his yuan qi. Otherwise, he would have died a long time ago with just the yuan qi in his body. He shook his head to dispel the drowsiness. He operated his martial arts to check his body. The result was very painful. He had failed to build his foundation. Just now, he felt that his whole body was suffering, but in fact, only about 1/10 of the tendons and veins in his body had expanded. In other words, the foundation building pill had only allowed less than 1/10 of the body to build his foundation. In short, he had failed to build his foundation. Helplessly opening his eyes, he found Bai Suzhen standing in front of him with an inquiring expression. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Just as he opened his mouth, he was shocked by his own voice. His voice was so hoarse that it didn't sound like he was speaking. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and prepared to accept his own voice. He said, "Sister, I failed." Bai Suzhen frowned. At this time, Guan Yu and Chen Feng also rushed out of the bamboo house at the same time. The three people who had just built their foundation looked at each other, then looked at their own bodies. They found that their bodies were covered in a layer of black sticky substance. The three of them asked in a croaky voice whether they had succeeded or failed to build their foundation. In the end, they all failed. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the spirit stones outside and said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone, don't be discouraged. First use the spirit stones to recover your strength. I still have some foundation building pills here." As he said that, he took out 2 foundation building pills and threw them over. The 2 of them caught them and nodded their heads in joy to express their gratitude. Then, they quickly ran over to the pile of spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu smiled apologetically at Bai Suzhen and immediately took out a spirit stone to recover his body. The latter slightly shook her head. After recovering his strength, he swallowed another foundation building pill. The same pain began again. Judging from the result of building his foundation just now, he reckoned that he wouldn't succeed this time. As expected, he failed again. Dejectedly, Guan Yu walked over with his head hung low. He also failed again. Surprisingly, among the 3, Chen Feng succeeded the second time. After using 2 foundation building pills, Chen Feng was so excited that he almost went crazy. He ran to Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the stone platform, and kowtowed. It was obvious that he was sincerely grateful to Yu Qianqiu. Damn it! This time, he really lost face. As the boss, he actually lost to the little brother. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He was very ashamed. Luckily, his face was covered by the black mucus, so his expression couldn't be seen. He threw another foundation building pill to Guan Yu and swallowed one himself. In the end, the 2 unlucky fellows still failed. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind and threw 1 foundation building pill after another to Guan Yu. He also swallowed one after another, but he still failed again and again. When the 2 of them used the 7th foundation building pill, Guan Yu screamed in the bamboo house. He also succeeded. He rushed out and knelt in front of Yu Qianqiu. He kowtowed heavily a few times with sincerity. 7 foundation building pills. Even if he had 2 immortal supporting badges and could return to Fuxian Island twice, he would only get 6 foundation building pills. He still wouldn't succeed. He couldn't repay this kindness. These were his heartfelt words. Yu Qianqiu felt ashamed to face the 2 of them, but he didn't know that Chen Feng, who had washed himself clean, was secretly worshipping his boss. His boss actually had so many foundation building pills that cultivators treated as treasures. He swallowed them one by one like they were candy. Who else in the cultivation world was more awesome than his boss? After all, foundation building pills were foundation building pills, not candy. There would definitely be an effect if he ate a lot of them. When the 12th foundation building pill's medicinal effects completely dissolved, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled. He felt like he was floating, and all the cells in his body seemed to have been reborn. The vital energy in his dantian automatically flowed into his meridians and circulated rapidly, turning into liquid vital energy before returning to his dantian. His body was so light, and the range of his divine sense had doubled. This kind of wonderful feeling was something that he couldn't feel when he was climbing the Qi refinement realm. Yu Qianqiu knew that he had succeeded. He directly bounced up from the stone platform, broke through the bamboo pavilion, and landed in the courtyard. Following that, he let out a long roar. The entire utopia's expression changed, and the ground seemed to be trembling and buzzing in response to his roar. The people in the courtyard almost couldn't stand steadily. Everyone was shocked, not knowing why Yu Qianqiu would have such a reaction after successfully building his foundation building pill. Chapter 83. The sky rumbled, and the originally white sky where the sun could not be seen suddenly became cloudy and clear. After a few moments, there was another loud noise in the sky, and the white mist suddenly gathered and scattered, changing its color, forming a dense layer of dark clouds, within which there were constantly sounds of thunder accompanied by lightning. The sky changed color. What was going on? They had never seen such a thing before. Facing the might of heaven and earth, that kind of powerful momentum made them feel powerless. Everyone felt like they had become ants, and their faces changed color. Bai Suzhen knew that after Yu Qianqiu's cultivation increased, the space's territory would also expand. She had also seen it before, but she had never seen such a scene. Looking at the lightning in the dark clouds, that powerful force that could destroy everything, Bai Suzhen's face flashed with a trace of panic. Could it be that the final stage of her heavenly tribulation had arrived? Yu Qianqiu stared at the sky. Suddenly, his heart felt as if everything in the world was waiting for something. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and faced the heaven and earth with his arms spread out. His divine sense expanded infinitely, gradually becoming one with the heaven and earth. Feeling the frequency of the heaven and earth, Yu Qianqiu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. They are waiting for my call. Come. Yu Qianqiu gently smiled and spread out his arms. He raised his head and stuck out his chest, standing in the shape of the character. An unknown force slowly lifted him into the sky. Guan Yu, Chen Feng, and Bai Suzhen were dumbfounded, not knowing what he was going to do. After his body rose to a certain position in the sky, Yu Qianqiu fiercely opened his eyes. In an instant, the lightning and the clouds became more and more restless. The lightning flashed and the thunder roared. First, a bolt of lightning quickly struck towards him, followed by countless bolts of lightning rushing towards him. All the lightning was released from the clouds, and with him as the end point, it weaved into a huge ball of light. Boss! Chen Feng cried out in alarm. The three's faces turned pale. Being struck by so many lightning bolts, no one would be able to survive. How could this be? Bai Suzhen clenched her teeth and flew towards the ball of light in the sky. She wanted to save Yu Qianqiu, regardless of whether he was dead or alive. Just as Bai Suzhen was about to get close to the ball of lightning, a bolt of lightning as thick as a water tank struck directly at her from the clouds. Bai Suzhen was shocked. She used all her strength of transcending tribulation to send out a dazzling white light, which fiercely collided with the lightning bolt. Bang! The powerful shockwaves caused Guan Yu and Chen Feng to fall to the ground. The two of them sat on the ground with their mouths agape. To be able to fight against such a powerful sky lightning, that level of cultivation was simply too shocking. It was something that they did not even dare to imagine. The birds and beasts that were roaming around were running around in all directions. After the loud sound, Bai Suzhen raised her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was sent flying diagonally to one side. Before she fell, another lightning bolt, which was twice as thick as the previous one, chased after her. A trace of despair flashed across Bai Suzhen's face. That attack just now had exhausted all of her cultivation. She could no longer resist. Stop! A loud shout came from the sky. The lightning bolt that chased after her instantly disappeared without a trace. Bai Suzhen safely fell into the sea of flowers. Her hair was messy and her clothes were untidy. She slowly stood up and helplessly looked at the sky. Sister, don't worry. I'm fine. Yu Qianzhou's comforting voice came from the sky. After he finished speaking, the lightning bolts in the sky gradually disappeared back into the clouds. The black clouds also stopped surging. The earth also became quiet. Yu Qianzhou stood in midair unscathed. He crossed his arms over his chest and suddenly shouted, "Open." He pushed his arms to the left and right, as if he was pushing away something extremely heavy. The earth trembled once again. The purple chaos that surrounded the sky and connected the earth quickly spread into the distance. The dark clouds in the sky churned again. They began to scatter from the center, chasing after the purple chaos in the distance. A piece of sky that was as blue velvet also spread out with the dark clouds. Suddenly, when the dark clouds retreated, they left behind a blazing sun in the blue sky, shining brightly on the earth. The clouds in the sky disappeared, and the earth was as calm as before. The sky that was originally hazy was replaced by a blue sky and a blazing sun. Yu Qianzhou was like a god who had created the world. He still stood in the sky, his clothes fluttering in the wind. Floating in the sky, he looked around. Utopia's territory had doubled in size again. Without a doubt, his cultivation level had increased again. He had finally broken through to the foundation establishment stage that he had been dreaming of. Yu Qianzhou could not help but laugh out loud in the sky. It had indeed calmed down. Guan Yu and Chen Feng got up and looked around, not knowing what to do. When they heard their boss' proud laughter, the two of them looked over at the same time. They turned their heads and looked at each other. F***CK. There was a strange cry in the sky. The two of them hurriedly looked over and saw Yu Qianzhou's limbs flapping as he turned into a black shadow and fell straight down. With a cry, he landed in the courtyard with his limbs facing the sky. Unreasonable. Yu Qianzhou lay on the ground and stared at the sky with his eyes wide open. He had been floating in the air with ease a moment ago. It was as if he could control the unknown power in the unseen world at will. The feeling of controlling the world was really good. Why did they suddenly lose contact with each other? It was as if everything that had happened just now was a dream, and the fall had woken him up. He moved his limbs that were about to fall apart and twisted his neck. Guan Yu and Chen Feng stood at the side and looked at him in bewilderment. Yu Qianzhou groaned. "What are you looking at? Quick, help me up. Damn it, I nearly fell to my death." The two of them helped him up hesitantly. How did their boss, who had been like a god just now, become like this in the blink of an eye? His clothes were tattered, and the black marks left on his body after he built his foundation establishment were gone. He was no different from a beggar. Ouch! Yu Qianzhou stood up and groaned. He looked around. The bamboo house had all collapsed, and the trees in the forest were all over the place. The entire sea of flowers had also been destroyed. All of this proved that what had happened earlier was real and not a dream. Thinking of this, Yu Qianzhou said anxiously, "Where's my sister? Quick, help me to my sister's place." Actually, when Bai Suzhen saw him falling from the sky, she had already rushed over. As soon as she arrived, she heard her brother asking for her anxiously. She couldn't help but have a gentle expression on her face. She said softly, "I'm here." Yu Qianzhou suddenly turned around. Bai Suzhen's beautiful hair was messy, and her clothes were untidy. Her pale face was barely able to hang a smile, and the trace of blood at the corner of her mouth was eye-catching. Since the first time Yu Qianzhou saw her, she had always been gentle and quiet. Her body was always clean and spotless. Her beautiful and dignified appearance was unique in the world. When had she ever looked so battered and exhausted? She was trying to save him with her life just now. It was all his fault for being careless. Yu Qianzhou felt a sharp pain in his heart. He was extremely regretful, and his eyes were slightly moist. He pushed away the two people who were supporting him, and before his body could recover, he staggered over and hugged Baisujan tightly. He kept blaming himself, "It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I didn't pay attention just now, and that's why you got injured." Baisujan's pale face had a layer of red. In more than 200 years, this was the first time she was hugged by a man, and it was a very tight hug. There were people watching from the side. She used a bit of strength to push Yu Qianqiu away. She shook her head and said, "I'm fine. It's just that I used up too much of my vitality, and I'm a little weak. Are you all right?" Yu Qianqiu also felt that he had unintentionally taken advantage of her. He scratched his head and said with a smile, I'm fine. It's just that my body is a little numb from the fall, and I haven't recovered yet. I'll be fine in a while." As he said that, he even used his fist to hit his chest, indicating that he was fine. Baisujan nodded and looked at him. She said softly, "Go wash up." After saying that, she found a clean corner in the courtyard and sat down cross-legged with her eyes closed. Knowing that she wanted to recover her lost vitality, Yu Qianqiu looked at his body and said to his two subordinates, "My limbs are still a little weak. I'll have to trouble the two of you to help me to wash up by the lake." The two nodded and supported him on his left and right. When they passed by the destroyed sea of flowers, Yu Qianqiu sighed, "I made a little too much of a commotion just now. The two of you should fix it up again when you have time. My sister likes flowers. Also, I'll leave the ruined bamboo house in your hands." It was rare for Guan Yu and Chen Feng to say in unison, "Yes." When they walked to the lake, they realized that their bodies seemed to have returned to normal. They tried to move around, and there was still a little discomfort, but there was no other reaction. Yu Qianqiu quickly took off his clothes and happily jumped into the lake. He was an expert swimmer in his previous life. At this moment, he was swimming freestyle, butterfly, breaststroke. All kinds of swimming styles that Guan Yu and Chen Feng had never seen before were displayed. Chen Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. After today, his admiration for Boss skyrocketed. Chapter 84. After washing up, Yu Qianqiu took out a brand new Fuxian Island uniform from his storage bag and put it on. He sat down cross-legged to check the condition of his body. Guan Yu and Chen Feng didn't need to say anything. They consciously stood on his left and right sides to protect him. Although there was no danger here, they seemed to have the awareness of being subordinates. His body's toughness had greatly increased. The width and toughness of the veins in his body were also incomparable. It seemed that after successfully building his foundation, his body, the carrier, had a qualitative leap. The true qi in his dantian had automatically refined into white liquid true qi. It shouldn't be called true qi now, it should be called essence qi. Unfortunately, it was only a small ball, not enough to fill the gap between his dantian's teeth. Essence qi revolved, and his body was immediately filled with power. After a little experience, he realized that the difference between cultivation before and after building his foundation was like heaven and earth. No wonder every cultivator wanted to break through to the foundation building stage. Apart from the increase in cultivation, there was another more important reason, and that was the increase in lifespan. In this era, a normal person could live to 60 or 70 years old. If it was a qi refinement cultivator, it wouldn't be a problem to live to 100 years old. Once he broke through to the foundation building stage, his lifespan would increase by another 50 years. There were 4 stages: foundation building, core formation, nascent soul, and tribulation passing. Each stage was divided into early, middle, and last stages. Each stage meant 50 years of lifespan. If he could cultivate to the last stage of tribulation passing, his lifespan would increase by another 600 years. There was also the legendary soul formation stage. It was said that it was also divided into 3 stages. The first stage would increase his lifespan by 800 years, and the third stage would increase his lifespan by 2,400 years. After breaking through to become a god, his lifespan would be as long as heaven and earth, but this was all a legend. Yu Qianqiu thought about trying to see if there was a chance to live forever, but after thinking about it, he didn't think it was possible, although he had a bit of a dream. On the way back, Yu Qianqiu walked in front while Guan Yu and Chen Feng consciously followed behind. Yu Qianqiu smiled and didn't say anything. It was as if he had found the feeling of being a boss in his previous life. Yun Chang, didn't you say that when you reach the foundation building stage, you can ride a sword? Did your father or grandfather teach you anything about this? Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Yu shook his head and said, "No, my grandfather and father have always abided by the sect rules in supporting Immortal Island. They didn't impart anything to me without permission. After my grandfather passed away and my father's whereabouts were unknown, I didn't have the chance to learn from him." His tone was a little gloomy. Chen Feng looked at him in shock. It turned out that Guan Yu was from supporting Immortal Island. This was the first time he found out. Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and thought that there was a reason why Guan Yu was expelled from the supporting Immortal Island. There were many people with low aptitudes in every sect and sect. Who had ever heard of a grandfather who was an elder of a sect but his grandson couldn't even reach the foundation building realm and was expelled from the sect? Could it be that the supporting Immortal Island had given out so many foundation building pills every year? Was it so difficult for a dignified elder to get a few more building foundation done? This was probably related to his father and grandfather's pedantry. "Boss, you're already at the foundation building stage. You can openly go to the scripture depository to learn all kinds of spells. There's no lack of sword kinesis flight spells there." Guan Yu added. Scripture depository. Yu Qianqiu was a little gloomy. He knew that foundation building disciples could enter the scripture depository to learn spells, but didn't he want to hide it? Mulberry Garden's foundation building disciples would naturally be reported by Mulberry Garden to Wanfen Garden. Then, it would be passed on to the sect for confirmation before being recorded. Ma Jiugu and the others would inevitably ask after he succeeded in foundation building. How should he answer then? What was the point of not learning some defensive spells after succeeding in foundation building? Presumably, Guan Yu and Chen Feng were also looking forward to it. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and said with a frown, "I'll think of a way to learn spells." In the collapsed bamboo courtyard, Bai Suzhen was still sitting cross-legged there. Yu Qianqiu didn't disturb her. He had already stayed here for 2 days, and staying too long wasn't a good idea. He turned around and looked at the mess he made and said to the two, "I'll leave this place to you. When I come next time, I'll ask my sister to return your natal primordial spirits." The two were very excited and said in unison, "Yes." Back in the hut, Furong was no longer on the bed. At this hour, she should be working in the spiritual grass field. His eyes suddenly brightened when he glanced at the bed. It was inconvenient for him to go to the scripture depository, but couldn't Furong, who was at the foundation building stage, go? Wouldn't it be the same to ask her to write it down and bring it to me? The most important thing was that this girl was obedient and trustworthy. She was really the best person to do this. It was reasonable to say that with Yan Zixia's cultivation level, she could also do it, but because she was from the Hundred Flowers Valley, she rarely showed up in the Mulberry Garden. She definitely wouldn't go to a place as ostentatious as the scripture depository. Having made up his mind, he was in a good mood and leisurely walked to the spiritual grass field. There were a few familiar figures, but he didn't see Furong's shadow. Looking around, Yu Qianqiu frowned deeply. At the entrance of the Mulberry Garden, Furong was limping and carrying a load. She bit her lip and walked over with difficulty step by step. When Yu Qianqiu saw her, his first thought was that this girl was beaten by someone. It seemed that both her legs were injured. Otherwise, with her cultivation level at the late stage of foundation building, even if she could walk with one leg, carrying a load wouldn't be so difficult. Who was so wicked? Knowing that she had to carry a load and work every day, he actually hurt her legs. An indescribable anger ignited in Yuchincho's chest. This girl was very timid. She never went to provoke people, and she never dared to provoke people. Who had such a big grudge against her that they actually wanted to mess with her like this? Yuchincho took a deep breath and swallowed his anger. He hurriedly ran over and said, "Martial Uncle Furong, quickly give me the load." Who would have thought that when Furong saw him, it was as if she had seen a ghost. She was so scared that she retreated again and again. Unable to bear it, both of her legs were injured. She lost her balance and the load on her small shoulders fell down. The feces in the 2 buckets spilled all over the ground. She also fell on her butt and was covered in dirt. Yuchincho was stunned. Then, ignoring the dirt on the ground, he walked over to help her up. With a heavy expression, he asked, "What happened to your leg?" Furong, who was helped up, pushed him away and said fearfully, "It's nothing. I accidentally fell when I was walking." Their movements immediately attracted other people's attention. Quite a few female disciples who were squatting in the spiritual herb field and working stood up and looked in their direction. Someone with a cultivation level in the late stage of the foundation building realm could fall while walking, and even injure both of her legs like this. Even a ghost wouldn't believe that. Yuchincho snorted coldly and said, "Who did it?" Furong begged, "I beg you, don't worry about me. I beg you, hurry up and leave." Seeing that she didn't answer, Yuchincho immediately disregarded everything and forcibly carried her to the side. He lifted up her long skirt to examine the injuries on her legs. Furong struggled with all her might. This caused quite a few female disciples in the spiritual herb field to cry out in alarm. The result of his examination was that the bones in the same position on both legs were broken, and both legs were very swollen. Fortunately, Furong was a cultivator with a certain level of cultivation. If it was a normal person, let alone working, they wouldn't even be able to walk. Yuchincho let go of her and angrily said, "Why didn't you apply medicine? Why didn't you treat your injuries? Both your legs were broken, so why did you still run out to work? Who in the world did it?" Furong stared behind him and shook her head repeatedly in fright. Yuchincho turned his head to look behind him. Elder Lon expressionlessly walked over. Elder Lon swept a glance at the feces scattered all over the ground, then stared at Furong and said coldly, "What's going on here?" Furong was so scared that she was trembling. Yuchincho knew she was most afraid of Elder Lon, so he immediately explained, "Disciple accidentally bumped into Martial Uncle, that's why I ended up like this. Elder Lon, please punish me." Chapter 85. Lon Bingxue was still staring at Furong and said coldly, "Really?" Furong looked panicked and didn't know what to do. Yuchincho rushed to answer, "Yes, many of the disciples in the garden saw what happened just now. I hope Elder Lon won't blame Martial Uncle. I'll clean this place up later." Lon Bingxue looked at Yuchincho and her cold expression softened a lot. She didn't say anything and turned around to walk into the inner garden. "Wait, Lon Bingxue. I have a favor to ask." Yuchincho shouted. "What is it?" Lon Bingxue turned around and asked. Yuchincho bowed and said, "Junior Master Furong's legs are injured. Both of her thighs are broken. I want some medicine." He knew that Lon Bingxue was the housekeeper of the garden. She was the most suitable person to ask. However, she shook her head and said, "We don't have such medicine." "No? How is that possible?" Yuchincho was startled. He let out a breath and said, "Then this disciple will go ask Jiu Gu for a consecration. Maybe she has it." Lon Bingxue reached out a hand and blocked his way. She said slowly, I told you that we don't have this kind of medicine in Mulberry Garden. Don't tell me you don't believe me. A stream of cold air floated out of her hand. So cold. Yu Qianqiu didn't know what kind of martial arts this woman practiced. He couldn't help but shiver. He suspected that she was the one who broke Furong's legs. Otherwise, why would she be so cruel? No matter how low her cultivation was, they were still disciples of the same school. It was just a guess. He didn't have any evidence and Furong wouldn't say anything. It was not good to offend someone of this level. He took a step away from the freezing cold and politely bowed, Thank you for your guidance, Elder Lan. This disciple understands. Lan Bingxue glanced at the two of them and went back to the inner garden. Let's go. I will take you to a place to heal. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said to Furong. There were not many people he was familiar with and could help him in the 10,000 Fragrance Garden. He thought of Elder Ferdinand who was in charge of the 10,000 Fragrance Garden. Furong shook her head and begged, Please don't care about me, okay? Just move to the inner garden. At this point, she bit her lip and stopped, as if she had said something she shouldn't. Yu Qianqiu said cautiously, What does this have to do with me moving to the inner garden? Could it be that your leg was injured because I refused to move to the inner garden? Furong frantically waved her hands and said, No, it really isn't. Her abnormal behavior aroused Yu Qianqiu's suspicion even more, reminding him of a certain matter. Some time ago, Yan Zixia had asked him several times to move into the inner garden, but he had always refused. He knew that Yan Zixia liked him, and had asked him to live in the inner garden so that they could meet at any time. However, because he was worried that it would be inconvenient to live in the inner garden, and he was afraid that others would discover his secret, and Furong's mouth was very reliable. She could keep the secret that he often disappeared for no reason, so he rejected Yan Zixia and would rather live with Furong in a small nest. Could it be that because he and Furong refused to separate from each other, it aroused Yan Zixia's jealousy and caused trouble for Furong? This woman was a very jealous animal. The more Yu Qianqiu thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. He probed, Your leg was injured by Yan Zixia. Furong really didn't want to stand here and be entangled with him endlessly. She cried, No. After saying this, she endured the pain in her leg and went to pick up the overturned bucket. Did you ruin your face, and now you want to cripple your legs? Yu Qianqiu shouted. He kicked away the bucket she wanted to pick up, picked her up by the waist, and ran outside. Furong kept struggling and even used her fists. However, perhaps she was really too kind and didn't seem to know how to refuse others, or how to hit people. The strength of her fists hitting Yu Qianqiu's body was directly ignored by him. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly at the thought of wasting his late-stage foundation establishment realm cultivation. He didn't think he was a good person, and he didn't have the obligation to save the dying and help the injured. However, as a man, there were some things he should do and some things he shouldn't, not to mention that she might have been implicated by him. He would just treat it as doing a good deed and helping the weak. A man carrying a woman running in broad daylight had never appeared in Wanfen Garden before, so it attracted a lot of people's attention. As soon as they ran to the entrance of Wanfen Garden's main hall, they were naturally stopped by the guards. Let go of me. Furong was still struggling, and Yu Qianqiu also became a little angry. With a paw sound, he slapped Furong's wriggling butt. The person on his shoulder immediately quieted down, and the two female disciples guarding the entrance were also a little dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu said while carrying Furong, Disciple Yu Qianqiu is here to see Elder Fei. The female guard saw the two of them rushing in with dirty clothes. She originally wanted to question them, but at this time, she was also stunned and said, Wait. She went in to report. Not long after, she came out and told him that Elder Fei let him in. After carrying Furong in, he saw Ferdinand standing in the main hall of the main hall. Yu Qianqiu, what are you doing? Ferdinand saw him carrying a person and asked curiously. Because of what happened in the past, Yu Qianqiu didn't have a good impression of him, so he didn't bother to be polite with him. He put Furong down and helped her to sit on a chair. Then he saluted and said, I don't know who broke Martial Aunt Furong's leg. Please treat her injury, Elder Fei. However, he saw him staring at Furong in a daze. The latter was timid and didn't dare to raise her head under his gaze. Yu Qianqiu looked at both sides. Could it be that Ferdinand had a special hobby of liking ugly girls? No wonder Lan Bingxue was so beautiful but lived apart from him for a long time. Thinking about it made him shudder. He hurriedly saluted again and said, Please treat Martial Aunt Furong's injury, Elder Fei. Ah! Ferdinand came back to his senses and said anxiously, Furong is injured. Where is the injury? Both of her thigh bones were broken. What? Ferdinand screamed and took a few steps forward. Just as he was about to reach out and lift up the long skirt covering Furong's legs, the latter subconsciously covered it with her hands. Ferdinand's hand paused. Then he remembered that the other party was a woman, and it was a bit indecent to do so. He squatted down on the ground and put his hands directly on Furong's knees. He transferred his chi from his palms into the other party's leg to check the injury. After a while, Ferdinand's face became livid. He slowly stood up and suddenly slammed his palm on the tea table. Bang! The tea table was smashed into pieces. Furong was so scared that she shrank in the chair. Ferdinand's eyes were red, and his chest was heaving. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, Who did it? Damn it! Why are you getting angry at me? I didn't do it. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, I don't know either. Ferdinand stared at Furong again, and his expression became very kind. He said, Tell me who did it. Furong stammered, No. No, I fell myself. Her words could not deceive Yu Qianqiu, nor could it deceive Ferdinand. The latter gritted his teeth and said, Was it Lan Bingxue who did it? Furong shook her head in fear. Yu Qianqiu was very surprised. Looking at Ferdinand's expression, it was clear that Elder Lan was the one who did it. What was even more strange was why he was so concerned about Furong. Elder Ferdinand, she is timid. Why don't you heal her first? If you have any questions, ask later, Yu Qianqiu said. Unexpectedly, Ferdinand pointed at him and scolded, I don't need you to be a good person. Why did I bring you to the mulberry garden? I just wanted you to take care of her. How come you don't know who did it when she was injured like this? Trash. Yu Qianqiu pointed at himself. He opened his mouth and was speechless. His mind was in a mess. Chapter 86. Humph. Fernand took out a piece of jade from his storage pouch, made a few finger seals, and said to the jade, Junior Martial Sister Chiu, I'm Fernand, please come here quickly. Finished speaking, he crushed it in his hand. Then, he took out a jade stone and cast the same spell. He shouted, Lan Bingxue, come here. He crushed the jade stone. After doing this, Ferdinand angrily paced back and forth in the lobby. Yu Qianqiu also came to his senses. He finally understood why Ferdinand wanted him to grow spirit herbs in the mulberry garden. It was to take care of Hibiscus. Who was this ugly girl? He looked at Hibiscus, who was in a panic speechlessly. She was probably afraid when she heard that Elder Lan was coming. Not long after, a disciple's voice came from outside the hall, Elder Chiu. A graceful woman led a delicate and pretty young girl in. Yu Qianqiu had seen this woman before and knew that she was Elder Chiu, who was in charge of healing supporting Immortal Island's disciples. However, he had never seen the young girl behind her. Yu Qianqiu bowed. Disciple Yu Qianqiu greets Elder Qiu. Hibiscus also wanted to stand up and bow, but Elder Fei pressed her shoulder. You shouldn't stand. Elder Qiu won't blame you. She then turned her head and said, Junior sister, come and take a look at her. Her leg bones are broken and there should be some other injuries. I can't do it. You are an expert, so I had to invite you. Elder Qiu nodded. Senior brother, you don't have to be so polite with me. He walked to Hibiscus and was slightly startled when he saw her face. He asked Ferdinand, is it Hibiscus? The latter nodded sadly. Damn. Who was this girl? How could a big shot know her? Yu Qianqiu had to re-examine this ugly girl. Elder Jiu, Elder Lon. The disciple's voice came from outside. Lon Bingxue, who was sneering, walked in with Ma Jiu. Elder Jiu. Ferdinand and Elder Qiu bowed. Consecrated Jiu, Elder Lon. Yu Qianqiu and the pretty girl greeted. Hibiscus, who was about to bow, was once again pressed down on her shoulder by Ferdinand. Lon Bingxue sneered, Ferdinand, why did you call me here? Ferdinand's face was full of anger. He pointed at Hibiscus and shouted at her, did you break her legs? Lon Bingxue glanced at Hibiscus and said, did she tell you herself? I'm asking you, did you interrupt? Ferdinand shouted again. So what if I am? Do you feel sorry for her? Lon Bingxue scornfully said, I should have killed her and that little bitch together. All right. What did you promise me back then? Ferdinand's chest heaved up and down rapidly. He said angrily, you promised Jiu and me that you wouldn't hurt her as long as I don't see her again. I've always kept my promise. What did you do? There's an affair, there's definitely an affair. Yu Qianqiu looked at Ferdinand, and then at Lon Bingxue. Ma Jiu heavily poked the hall with her walking stick. Suddenly, the hall became silent. Only Ferdinand's rapid breathing could be heard. She walked to Hibiscus with her walking stick and casually touched Hibiscus's legs. Her half-drooping eyelids suddenly opened. She stared at Lon Bingxue and said in a deep voice, Lon girl, what's going on? Lon Bingxue's face flashed with a trace of panic. She hurriedly walked over, made a finger gesture, and whispered in Ma Jiu's ear. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu from time to time. Yu Qianqiu knew that she was using a kind of sound transmission spell. No one could hear it except for the designated person. But why did she keep pointing at him? He was depressed. Now, everyone was staring at him, and Ferdinand was staring at him with bloodshot eyes, as if he was going to eat him. After listening to Lon Bingxue's explanation, Ma Jiu's eyelids returned to normal. She shook her head and said, Lon girl. I have my own plan. Why do I need you to intervene? Since you have broken the original promise, Ferdinand has the right to reunite with his daughter. Don't have any ideas about her in the future. Otherwise, I won't spare you. Daughter? Is she talking about Hibiscus? Yu Qianqiu had a rough idea of what was going on. He guessed that Furong was the daughter of Ferdinand after he had an affair with a woman. In the end, his wife found out and killed his lover. After that, the two of them made an agreement, and Lon Bingxue took his daughter away. But what does this have to do with me? Why is Samba pointing at me? The anger on Ferdinand's face instantly turned into surprise. It seemed that he couldn't believe it was true. Lon Bingxue's face changed color. She stared at Hibiscus while trembling all over. A faint white mist was emitted from her body. The temperature of the whole hall immediately dropped. What? Lon girl, don't you agree? Ma Jiu poked Lon Bingxue with her walking stick. Lon Bingxue shook her head and said, I don't dare. Her eyes were full of resentment as she stared at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was alarmed. He knew that it was him who ruined her plan. Now, he had accidentally made another strong enemy. Well, Hibiscus doesn't need to return to Mulberry Garden anymore. Ferdinand doesn't need to pursue the matter of lawn girl hurting others. From today onwards, the two of you will treat it as if it never happened. Don't make trouble anymore. Ma Jiu-gu turned her head and said, Ferdinand, you are in charge of Wanfen Garden. Can you agree if I make the decision? Ferdinand was pleasantly surprised and said, everything is up to Jiu-gu. Ferdinand thanks Jiu-gu. He was naturally happy to get his daughter back. Hibiscus was timid, but she was not stupid. At this time, her eyes were filled with tears and she bit her lips. Yu Qianqiu was thinking about how to get along with Lan Bingxue in the future. Suddenly, Ma Jiu-gu's voice came to his ears, Yu Qianqiu, I heard that you refined a lot of foundation building pills. You must have succeeded in building your foundation, right? Yu Qianqiu's face sank. He looked at her and heard her say, don't worry about others hearing me. I use divine sense to transmit my voice. Only you can hear it. Don't worry about others. It seemed that what he said to Yan Zixia didn't work. She still told Ma Jiu about it. This woman. A trace of disgust flashed in his heart. Yu Qianqiu nodded unhappily and admitted that he had succeeded in building his foundation. Ma Jiu-gu said to him, then this old woman congratulates you. If someone asks about you in the future, you can tell them that this old woman gave you foundation building pills. Yu Qianqiu nodded again. He knew that this was a gesture of goodwill and helped him avoid a lot of trouble. It was reasonable to say that this was what he wanted, so he should be happy. But when he thought that it was his woman who leaked the secret, he couldn't be happy. Dinan, Yu Qianqiu has succeeded in building his foundation. Tell him. Ma Jiu-gu suddenly said. What? He succeeded in building his foundation. I got it. Fernand was a bit surprised. But since Ma Jiu-gu said so, it shouldn't be a lie. Moreover, he knew what he should not ask. In the hall, apart from Elder Qiu, the young girl, and Furong, Lan Bingxue also looked at Yu Qianqiu with a bit of surprise. She didn't know when he succeeded in building his foundation. She was doing a good deed to the end, helping the Buddha to the west. Why did she do me such a big favor? Yu Qianqiu sighed. He was a bit creeped out thinking that a person with such a high cultivation was scheming against him. Your daughter has returned to your side. What are you going to do with Yu Qianqiu? Ma Jiu-gu asked. Ferdinand muttered, I borrowed him from Elder Guan. I promised to return him to him. If Ninth Aunt has any use for him, of course, he will continue to stay in the Mulberry Garden. I don't think Elder Guan will have any objection. Ma Jiu-gu shook her head and said, isn't that forcing him? I think Yu Qianqiu should make the decision himself. If he wants to go back to Alchemy Pavilion, he can go back. If he wants to stay in Mulberry Garden, I will talk to Wei Wu and ask him to give this disciple to Mulberry Garden. Elder Qiu and the young girl looked at Yu Qianqiu together. They didn't know why Ma Jiu-gu thought so highly of him. Just do as Jiu-gu said. Fernand nodded and said to Yu Qianqiu, do you want to stay in Mulberry Garden or go back to Alchemy Pavilion? Yu Qianqiu finally understood the reason why Ma Jiu-gu showed goodwill to him. It turned out that she wanted him to stay in Mulberry Garden. What was on him that she wanted? After a moment of silence, he slowly said, a master for a day is a master for life. I want to go back to master. Chapter 87. Ma Jiu-gu slowly closed her eyes. Everyone could understand the meaning behind her words. She said this because she wanted Yu Qianqiu to stay, but the latter didn't give her any face. Everyone was shocked. The girl who came with Elder Qiu couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu. Ferdinand's expression changed. He said in a low voice, Yu Qianqiu, do you want to reconsider? It's your good fortune to have Jogu ask. Under everyone's gazes, Yu Qianqiu remained silent. There was no need to say anything, and this already represented his attitude. Lan Bingxue shouted, Yu Qianqiu, do you really think you are somebody? Don't be so ungrateful. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I, Yu Qianqiu, am not somebody, but if master doesn't give up, I won't dare to turn my back on him. Everyone was moved by his words. The young girl by Elder Chio's side looked at him with an even brighter gaze. You. Lan Bingxue said angrily, you're courting death. She took a step forward and was about to attack. Lan girl. Ma Jiugu waved her hand to stop her. She opened her eyes to look at Yu Qianqiu and said, Wei Wu has been muddle-headed all day long. I didn't expect that he would be so lucky to have accepted a good disciple. Speaking of which, he is my grandnephew. I should be happy for him. Most of the people in the cultivation world were people who wouldn't get up early if there were no benefits. If an expert like Ma Jiugu were to take a liking to someone like Ma Jiugu, then they would be extremely happy. Not to mention how many benefits they could get, just the fact that an expert at the late stage of the crossing tribulation stage was standing behind them meant that no matter how strong the cultivation world was, they would have to think twice before making a move on him. Therefore, Ma Jiugu's words of praise were indeed sincere. Thank you, Elder Jiugu. Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. In fact, he didn't think so much, and he wasn't as great as he said. He was just a little disappointed in Yan Zixia, so disappointed that he didn't want to go back to the mulberry garden. He could let anyone else down, but he couldn't accept the betrayal of his own people. Before this, he was confident that Yan Zixia could become his woman. Ma Jiugu nodded and said to Lan Bingxue, let's go back. When passing by Yu Qianqiu, she said to him, don't forget that you still owe me a favor. Yu Qianqiu bowed, this disciple dares not forget. That's good, Ma Jiugu said and left the hall with Lan Bingxue. Before he left, he cast a cold glance at Yu Qianqiu. As soon as they left, everyone's attention in the main hall shifted to Furong, but they saw that she was silent and crying non-stop. Ferdinand's eyes were red as he heaved a long sigh and said to Elder Chiu, please, junior sister. Because she was a woman, it was inconvenient for her to recuperate in the main hall, so Ferdinand ordered someone to clean up a room. Seeing that the people who helped her into the room were all strangers, Furong couldn't help but panic. She suddenly turned around and shouted into the main hall, Yu Qianqiu. She didn't speak, but this naturally attracted everyone's attention, especially the person she called. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. This was the first time Furong called him. He scratched his head and said, Senior. Senior sister, what's the matter? He was used to calling her martial uncle, so he almost couldn't change it. He remembered that he was also a foundation-building cultivator, so he should call her senior sister. Furong was also not used to it, so she said awkwardly, are you leaving? Oh. I'm going back to Alchemy Pavilion to see my master. With Elder Fei taking care of you, senior sister, you can recuperate in peace. Yu Qianqiu realized. Furong gritted her teeth and said, will you come back? This ugly girl was very timid. She was probably a little afraid of being alone here. Yu Qianqiu comforted, senior sister, don't worry. I'll definitely come to see you often when I'm free. Ferdinand looked at the two thoughtfully. Seeing that Furong didn't speak, he ordered someone to help her in. There were only 2 men left in the main hall, and it was not convenient for them to follow in. Yu Qianqiu, when do you want to return to Alchemy Pavilion? Ferdinand asked, his eyes looking up and down. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, I have to go back sooner or later. It's better to go back early than late. I'll go back now. Ferdinand nodded and said, I'll send you back. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly waved his hand and said, no need, no need. How can I trouble elder? Disciple knows the way back. It has nothing to do with you. I borrowed people from Alchemy Pavilion. I have to give Elder Guan an explanation. Ferdinand said. But senior sister Furong, Ferdinand waved his hand and said, she won't recover for a while. It's enough for her to go back and forth to Alchemy Pavilion. After that, he summoned another disciple and told him to listen to Elder Cho's arrangement. The two of them left the main hall. Yu Qianqiu thought that he was going to grab him and fly away again. Who knew that Ferdinand would walk, so he had to follow. Along the way, Ferdinand constantly looked at Yu Qianqiu with strange eyes. The latter didn't know what he was doing, so he simply pretended not to see it. Otherwise, he would panic in his heart. Not long after, Ferdinand finally asked, I heard that you've been sleeping in the same room with Furong in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and hurriedly explained, No, we were in the same room, but not on the same bed. Elder Fei, don't misunderstand. Ferdinand nodded noncommittally inside. Furong's mother died early, and I didn't fulfill my responsibility as a father. I'm sorry for her. Yu Qianqiu, can I ask you something? I'm tired of listening to this. Damn it. It's none of my business that you didn't fulfill your responsibility as a father. Yu Qianqiu thought so in his heart, but he respectfully said, Elder Fei, you must be joking. As long as this disciple can do it, I won't hesitate. I can see that she is close to you. After you go back to the Alchemy Pavilion, I hope that you can come and see her often when you have time. Ferdinand, the dignified Wanfen Garden's chief elder, looked at him with a pleading look. This is no problem, I'm afraid. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, I'm afraid that after I go back, I won't be able to control myself. I don't know if I will have time. You don't have to worry about this. I will find Guan Weiwu to arrange a good position for you. If he dares to disagree, the spirit herbs of Wanfen Garden are not so easy to get. Speaking of this, Ferdinand's eyes actually showed a trace of fierce light. As if whoever dared to block his daughter's happiness, he would bite that person to death. Love for a child. Yu Qianqiu smiled. He wanted to ask about Furong's life experience and what was the matter with the injury on her face, but after thinking about it, it was better not to ask. The distance from Wanfen Garden to the Alchemy Pavilion was not far, but it was not close either. It would take a lot of time to walk dozens of miles. In the end, Ferdinand, who was used to flying, could not stand it anymore. He grabbed Yu Qianqiu and flew away, landing on the top of the Alchemy Pavilion in a few moments. Unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu saw his old enemy, Yan Shu, at a glance. He was puzzled. What was this guy doing here all day long? Why did he bump into him as soon as he arrived? What bad luck. When enemies met, they looked at each other coldly. After the two of them met face to face, Yan Shu saluted Ferdinand and said, Elder Fei. Yan family's boy, where is Guan Weiwu? Ferdinand asked. Yan Shu replied, Elder Guan is inside. Oh, I have something to discuss with him. Ferdinand strode into the Alchemy Pavilion and shouted, Guan Weiwu, where are you hiding? Chapter 88. The remaining two did not speak. Yan Shu stared coldly at Yu Qianqiu unscrupulously, while the latter looked around and pretended not to see him. After waiting for a while and not seeing Ferdinand come out, Yan Shu's face became uglier and uglier. The other party clearly did not put him in his eyes. What are you doing here? Yan Shu finally could not hold it in and asked with a gloomy face. Yu Qianqiu looked around and pointed to himself and asked curiously, Are you talking to me? This made Yan Shu so angry that his face was distorted and he said sternly, Do the rules of Fuxian Island allow you to talk to your senior like this? Yu Qianqiu seemed to have come to his senses and bowed solemnly, Disciple Yu Qianqiu greets Uncle Master. Uncle Master. Yan Shu did not know that he had successfully built his foundation and was now in the foundation building stage. In addition, Yu Qianzhou's situation was special, so it was difficult for outsiders to see the depth of his cultivation. Instead, they thought that he deliberately called him a generation lower. Yan Shu's hatred for Yu Qianzhou was not ordinary. As the saying goes, if you hit someone, don't hit his face. Yu Qianzhou had reprimanded him in front of everyone in the alchemy pavilion, causing him to lose face in the alchemy pavilion. Until now, there were still disciples who mocked him behind his back. If he did not find a reason to take revenge, how could he swallow it? For a moment, he could not find any other reason, so he could only use it as a pretext and shouted angrily, "How dare you! You have no respect for your elders. Do you still have Fuxian Island's rules in your eyes?" Yu Qianzhou sneered, "Strange. Why don't I have Fuxian Island's rules in my eyes? Uncle Master Yan, tell me. What's going on?" It was Guan Weiwu's voice. He and Ferdinand walked out of the alchemy pavilion's hall together. "Master." Yu Qianzhou bowed and looked at Guan Weiwu affectionately. Now was the time to argue, and he needed his master's support. Guan Weiwu also looked at Yu Qianzhou affectionately and said with a smile, "It's good that you're back. I heard you succeeded in building your foundation. Congratulations." Just now, Ferdinand had already told him about Yu Qianzhou's success in building his foundation, as well as how Yu Qianzhou rejected Ma Jiugu and how Ma Jiugu praised him for having a good disciple. This pill addict was deeply moved and repeatedly said that he did not accept this disciple in vain. At this moment, no matter how she looked at Yu Qianzhou, she found him pleasing to the eye. Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, "Without Master's teachings, without consecrator Jiugu's nurturing, I wouldn't be who I am today." Guan Weiwu smiled awkwardly. He couldn't remember when he had taught this disciple, but when the disciple said this, the master also felt proud. In order to cover up the embarrassment, he turned to Yan Shu and said with a serious face, "I heard you shouting in the hall just now. What's going on?" Yan Shu originally wanted to exaggerate the small problem. He also knew that he couldn't do anything to Yu Qianzhou. He just wanted to disgust Yu Qianzhou. When he heard Guan Weiwu say that Yu Qianzhou had succeeded in building his foundation, he really couldn't find fault with him calling him Uncle Master. While he was in a daze, he heard the question and came back to his senses. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's nothing." Guan Weiwu wasn't a meticulous person. When he heard that it was nothing, he couldn't be bothered to ask more. He pointed at Yu Qianzhou and said, "Yan Shu, in the future, Yu Qianzhou will only be responsible for collecting spiritual herbs from Wanfen Garden. You don't need to arrange anything else. Also..." After he pondered for a while, he added, "Yu Qianzhou can enter the main hall to find me at any time. No one is to stop him." It was unknown whether this was a great love for his disciple. Once a disciple of supporting Immortal Island reached the foundation building stage, they would have a fixed position. However, the division of labor was different. After all, there were still people to do the sect's matters. However, it was much better than having people to look after chi refining disciples. Moreover, Yu Qianzhou's position could be said to be quite easy. Every day, he only needed to spend some time to go to Wanfen Garden to collect the spiritual herbs that the alchemy pavilion needed. Yan Shu replied with difficulty, "Yes." Yu Qianzhou guessed that it was also a good job. He glanced at Ferdinand. He reckoned that it was fought for by him. The reason was naturally to let him go to Wanfen Garden more often. After some things were explained clearly, Ferdinand's heart was filled with his daughter's injury and didn't stay for long. Guan Weiwu also went to do his own things. Yan Shu could be considered as the housekeeper of the alchemy pavilion, so the task of assigning Yu Qianzhou a place to stay fell on his shoulders. His desire for revenge was obvious, so Yu Qianzhou was thrown into the small, secluded courtyard that he had stayed in when he first arrived. It was reasonable to say that a disciple in the foundation building stage had the right to live in a place with better conditions. For Yu Qianqiu, there was no need to pick a residence. Moreover, the conditions here were much better than in the mulberry garden. He was also too lazy to make trouble with Yan Shu over such a small matter. The green mountains did not change, and the clear water would always flow. There would always be a time for revenge. There was no need to be calculative. The small courtyard was still the same. There was no change. He just didn't know if the people in the courtyard were still the same. Looking at the sky, all the disciples should have returned. He stood in the garden and deliberately coughed twice. Sure enough, hearing the movement in the courtyard, 3 doors opened. Looking at the 3 familiar faces in front of him who were a little surprised, Yu Qianqiu smiled slightly and said, 3 brothers, long time no see. I'm back. Ling Feng, Beizi, and Xian Ping looked at each other and showed a trace of embarrassment. In the beginning, the 3 of them thought that Yu Qianqiu was a braggart. They couldn't stand him and satirized him. Later, they saw him scold Yan Shu in public and did things that the 3 of them didn't dare to do. They knew that they had misunderstood him. After that, the 3 of them regretted it. Unfortunately, they didn't even have a chance to apologize. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Why? Don't you recognize me? Ling Feng smiled bitterly and said, How can we not recognize you? It's just that the 3 of us misunderstood Brother Yu that day. We are really ashamed. After one of them spoke, the other 2 also came over to apologize. Especially the silent Xian Ping. He was the one who said the worst things that day. Now, he said a bunch of apologies. There was no need for Yu Qianqiu to care about the past. The 4 of them called each other brothers. Without wine to liven things up, they naturally wouldn't be happy. Unfortunately, Xian Ping didn't have his personal stash. After all, their activity was limited, so it wasn't easy to get some wine. However, Yu Qianqiu took out 2 big jars from his storage bag. The 4 of them sat around the stone table and drank to their heart's content. After a few bowls of wine, Yu Qianqiu checked their cultivation. He found that they were still qi refining level 10. He asked curiously, could it be that you guys didn't get any foundation building pills this time? The 3 of them smiled bitterly and complained. They got the foundation building pills, but probably because their talent was too poor, none of them actually succeeded. What was even more tragic was that this was the second time they failed. If they failed again 3 years later, they would probably have to say goodbye to Fuxian Island forever. From then on, they would have to cut off their dreams of cultivation and return to the mortal world. Seeing the 3 of them swallow the bitterness in their mouths, Yu Qianqiu knew that the 3 of them had tried to build their foundation twice. As for whether they could succeed the 3rd time or not, they probably already knew. When he succeeded in building his foundation, he took 12 foundation building pills in a row. He was well aware of how much his body would change after taking 1 foundation building pill. Looking at the 3 of them dispirited, Yu Qianqiu had the urge to take out the foundation building pills to help them for free. He had plenty of foundation building pills anyway. However, he restrained himself. What good would it do him to help them now? Maybe in 3 years, when the 3 of them have their last hope shattered, he could help them without hesitation. At least now was not the time to help them. Their friendship over a glass of wine was very shallow. They hadn't known each other for a long time, so they still needed to understand each other better. In his previous life, there was a saying, there is no free lunch in this world. Yu Qianqiu deeply agreed with it. In life, one must give something in order to get something in return. He helped the 3 of them succeed in building their foundation. How are the 3 of them going to repay him? Let's not talk about us. How did Brother Yu do in building his foundation this time? Ling Feng asked, but in his heart, he was already sure that Yu Qianqiu's result was about the same as the three of them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come back to this small courtyard. Bei Zi and Xian Ping also had the same thought. Chapter 89. Yu Qianqiu could more or less guess what they were thinking. He downed a bowl of wine and placed it on the table lightly. He said indifferently, "My luck was better than yours. I succeeded in building my foundation." The three of them froze. After a while, Ling Feng asked in disbelief, "Brother Yu, did you say you succeeded in building your foundation?" "I was just lucky." Yu Qianqiu nodded. Bei Zi put down the wine bowl in her hand and looked at him again. She couldn't see any difference from before. She couldn't help but ask, "You're already in the foundation building stage. Why are you living here?" The three of them looked at him and waited for him to explain. "Of course it has something to do with Yan Shu." Yu Qianqiu smiled. "Actually, there's nothing wrong with living here. I have to thank Yan Shu for letting me reunite with my three brothers." After their doubts were cleared, the three of them looked at each other and stood up. They bowed together. "Martial Uncle Yu." Yu Qianqiu put on a shocked expression. He waited for the three of them to bow before standing up and stopping them. "What are the three of you doing?" Ling Feng shook his head and smiled bitterly. "This is the sect's rule." Sigh. "Since that's the case, we'll follow the rules in front of others. Let's call each other brothers when we're together." Yu Qianqiu pretended to sigh. Since he said that, the other three also nodded in agreement. It wasn't that Yu Qianqiu was greedy for this little bit of glory. It was because his mentality had changed greatly after building his foundation. He had to walk step by step. Going to Anquangsung to fetch Chu Ping was his goal. At least, it was his current goal. The cultivation world was different from other places. Everything depended on one's strength. In the past, working hard to build his foundation was the first step. After building his foundation, he had to work hard for the second step, which was to increase his strength. He had to be strong enough to go to Anquangsung to fetch Chu Ping. But how long would it take for a person to have the strength to receive Chu Ping? What level of cultivation did one have to reach? The scene of the battle between the Phantom Palace and Anquangsung in the Spirit Stone Mine was still vivid in their minds. At that time, they were amazed by the strength of the Phantom Palace, but then Anquangsung showed his strength and destroyed the Phantom Palace in one fell swoop. How terrifying was that strength! Wanting to rely on his own strength to pick up Chu Ping was tantamount to a fool's talk. He was afraid that before he could break into Anquangsung, his bones would not be left. Unless his cultivation could really reach the legendary deity stage, was that even possible? There was one more thing, the death of Master House Sansi. It was a pain that was deeply hidden in his heart. There was a grudge that could not be avenged. Who could understand this hatred? Who should he complain to? He had sworn that he would annihilate the exalted immortal sect. It was not a joke, it was the biggest motivation that spurred him forward. But the exalted immortal sect was much stronger than Anquangsung. How could he deal with this kind of strength with a little bit of cleverness? In addition to improving his own cultivation, he had to build a group of forces that belonged to him, a group that could compete with the strength of a sect. This was not a daydream. It was the conclusion that Yu Qianqiu came to after careful consideration. The golden bead in his hand was the lever that could pry open all of this. Guan Yu, Chen Feng, and Shi Xiaotian were the first batch of forces that belonged to him. Although they were still very immature, he believed that they would mature one day. This matter could not be rushed, and it could not be accomplished overnight. Then, Ling Feng, Beizi, Xian Ping, and everyone else in the cultivation world like you, I can give you the hope you need, but you must also pay for my hope. Yu Qianqiu pretended to accept their salute unintentionally so that the three of them would first have the awareness that he was a level higher than them. This was the awareness of subordinates, and it was also the awareness that a leader must have. The awareness that a leader was a level higher than the one being led. The cultivation pavilion was the most valiant place in Fuxian Island. Its territory alone occupied half of the island's area. There were many experts in it, and it was well known in the cultivation world. It was the foundation of Fuxian Island standing in the cultivation world. Just the number of tribulation passing elders had always been maintained at more than 80, and there were also countless other experts. For thousands of years, whenever the cultivation world was in chaos or Fuxian Island faced a crisis, the cultivation pavilion would strike like a thunderbolt and turn the tide. It had always maintained the reputation of Fuxian Island as the #1 righteous sect. Not to mention its other achievements, just talking about the last war between the righteous and the devil 400 years ago. Although the supporting Immortal Island was the #1 righteous sect, it was also isolated from the rest of the world. It would not easily get involved in any battles. However, the demonic sects were rampant, and the entire righteous sect was in a precarious situation. In desperation, the 36 sects that were ranked at the top of the righteous sects jointly begged the supporting Immortal Island to save the situation. In response to the request, Fuxian Island's cultivation pavilion sent 80 tribulation passing elders and 3,000 nascent soul cultivators to attack decisively. They turned the situation around in one fell swoop, and finally, they had a peak battle with the #1 demonic sect, the 10,000 demons. At the cost of more than 60 tribulation passing elders and 2,000 nascent soul cultivators, they repelled the 10,000 demons. The tragic degree of that battle was unbearable for those who were still alive today. Since then, the vitality of the entire cultivation world was greatly damaged, and there was more than 400 years of peace between the righteous and the devil sections. And because of that battle, no one dared to challenge the prestige of Fuxian Island's cultivation pavilion. The matter of Yu Qianqiu breaking through to the foundation establishment stage had already been reported to the sect. The next day, he received a registration notice, so he went to the Penglai Pavilion alone to register. As a result, he was asked to go to the cultivation pavilion to verify his name, and then return to the Penglai Pavilion to report. After that, he was officially recognized as a Foundation Establishment Stage disciple of Fuxian Island. Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Not only did this Penglai Pavilion look like a government office building in his previous life, but even the procedures were so similar. Yu Qianqiu had naturally heard of the Cultivation Pavilion. In his words, the status of the Cultivation Pavilion in Fuxian Island was like the Arhat Hall of the Shaolin Temple in his previous life. When there was a problem that needed to be solved by force, the martial monks of the Arhat Hall would come out to fight. Usually, if you stood at the highest point of the Alchemy Pavilion and looked east, you would find that most of the Fuxian Island in the east was shrouded in clouds, making it hard to see through. That was the location of the Cultivation Pavilion. The place was too big, so Yu Qianqiu didn't feel ashamed to ask a few people along the way. Only after asking did he find the right way to enter. There was a valley in the middle of the two mountains. At the entrance of the valley stood a large memorial arch looking at the three big words, Cultivation Pavilion, on the memorial arch in front of him. He really felt pressured. There was no other way. Who told him to succeed late and not make it in time, so he could only come alone? Under the memorial arch stood two disciples with swords on their backs. When they saw him come alone, they stared at him coldly. Yu Qianqiu smiled and walked in front of one of them. He took out a letter of introduction and a jade disc and handed it over respectfully. Foundation Establishment Stage Disciple Yu Qianqiu, here to verify my name. The person looked at him suspiciously, took the jade disc, and checked it with his divine sense. After confirming it, he said, "Follow me." Chapter 90. Correcting one's name is very simple and doesn't mean anything else. A sect that has existed for many years will always have its own management system. Disciples who have successfully advanced to the transcending tribulation stage must come to the cultivation pavilion to correct their name. They can't just say they are at the transcending tribulation stage. Also, some people practice strange spells that can completely conceal their cultivation, so they need to be verified. The process is very simple. After you prove your cultivation, the cultivation pavilion will award you a sword. Then, you will bring the sword back to the Penglai pavilion to be recorded. This will give you a proper confirmation. The two of them walked to the end of the valley. In front of them was a vast white fog. The guard disciple shot a white light into the fog, and the white fog automatically made a path. This white fog should be a formation. Yu Qianqiu saw a similar formation in the Hundred Flowers Valley. After passing through the white fog, a new Fuxian island appeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. From time to time, there would be people flying up and down on their swords in the vast wilderness. Clearly, there were many disciples cultivating. There were also people using sword arts to fight on their swords. They were fighting to their heart's content. The flowing light that flew through the sky and tunneled through the earth dazzled Yu Qianqiu. The two of them walked in the direction of the cultivation pavilion's main hall behind the plaza. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the figures flying on their swords. Just as his mind was in turmoil, a white light suddenly whizzed toward the two of them. Yu Qianqiu was greatly alarmed, only to see the disciple guarding the gate in front pointing with his finger and shouting, "Go!" The long sword on his back shot out with a chong sound, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a stream of light that shot towards the white light. Dang! The two lights collided with each other. The gatekeeping disciple pointed his finger at his back, and the long sword that returned to its sheath automatically. The white light flew to a tree in the distance and disappeared. There was clearly a person standing at the top of the tree. The disciple who was guarding the door waved his hand as a greeting and continued to walk forward without saying a word. Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind, was very envious. This was the cultivation world in his mind. The guard disciple led him to the cultivation pavilion's main hall. After seeing an elder with the surname Quan, he handed the jade plate to him and left. After Elder Quan checked the jade disc in his hand, he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a slightly surprised expression. Clearly, he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. Elder Quan didn't say anything and brought Yu Qianqiu to a spacious and empty room. There wasn't anything else in the room, not even a place to sit. There was only a large bell hanging in the middle of the room. Elder Quan shot a spell at the bell and said, "Yu Qianqiu, use all your cultivation to strike this bell with your bare hands." This was probably a magic tool to verify cultivation. Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully and said, "Yes." He walked in front of the hanging bell and silently channeled his true essence from his dantian. He circulated it to the limit and fiercely struck it with his palm. Dong! The deep and long bell rang. Yu Qianqiu didn't feel anything special. Suddenly, there was a light sound above his head. He looked up and saw a long sword falling towards him. He subconsciously reached out and caught it. Yu Qianqiu held the sword and looked suspiciously at Elder Quan. The latter twirled his beard with his fingers and nodded. "That's right, Yu Qianqiu. Your cultivation level has already reached the early stage of the foundation building realm. I'll give you a proper name. The sword in your hand is the proof." As he said this, he shouted towards the door, "Jiqing." An expressionless middle-aged man quietly walked in and bowed. Elder Quan. Elder Quan handed the jade plate to him and waved his hand. Early stage foundation establishment. "Take him away." "Yes." The middle-aged man then said to Yu Qianqiu, "Follow me." With that, he left. Yu Qianqiu bowed towards Elder Quan. "Thank you, Elder Quan." Seeing him nod, he turned and followed the middle-aged man. When they arrived at a room, the middle-aged man opened a box and placed the jade plate in his hand inside. He then opened another box and took out another jade plate. He handed it to Yu Qianqiu and said, "Insert your true essence." After Yu Qianqiu did as he was told, the middle-aged man struck the jade plate in his hand and said coldly, "Take good care of the jade plate. In the future, you can use it to freely enter and exit the cultivation pavilion's territory." "Yes." Yu Qianqiu saw that the middle-aged man's cold face was like a dog that didn't eat shit, so he couldn't be bothered to talk to him. Looking at the jade plate in his hand, he thought about the 100 Flowers Valley's 100 Flowers token. Wasn't it similar to this jade plate? The two were probably related, which could be seen from the fact that the palace mistress of 100 Flowers Palace and the previous sect master of Fuxian Island were father and daughter. Then, the middle-aged man didn't care whether Yu Qianqiu remembered it or not. He expressionlessly explained the rules in one breath and told him that he could go back. Yu Qianqiu thought about what he said and reluctantly bowed before leaving the room. It turned out that there were two other pavilions in the Cultivation Pavilion's territory, which occupied nearly half of Fuxian Island's territory. They were the Heavenly Heart Pavilion and the Sutra Depository, which were protected by the Cultivation Pavilion. When talking about the Heavenly Heart Pavilion, the middle-aged man sternly warned him not to go near it. The elders of Fuxian Island who lived there were late-stage tribulation passing experts. Otherwise, he couldn't complain if something happened. As for the Sutra Depository, it was protected by the Cultivation Pavilion because it contained all the spells and precious ancient books of Fuxian Island. The disciples of Fuxian Island who were not part of the Cultivation Pavilion were given the jade plates so that they could pass through the pavilion's protective array and enter the Sutra Depository to study. Yu Qianqiu's heart palpitated with eagerness. Right now, he only had cultivation, but what he lacked was cultivation techniques. After leaving the main hall, he really wanted to go to the Sutra Depository to take a look. However, he still had to return to Penglai Pavilion to report, so he wasn't in a hurry. He looked around at the figures flying around. He walked past the square and came to the sea of fog at the entrance. He took out the jade plate and injected his primordial essence into it. A white light shot into the sea of fog, and the fog rolled to make a path. He smoothly passed through the fog and returned to the valley. When he passed by the gate, he saw the two disciples guarding the gate. He cupped his hands and bowed before leaving the Cultivation Pavilion. After he came out, he pulled out the long sword in his hand. The sword was like a pool of autumn water. It was so bright that one could see one's reflection. The sword and the handle were engraved with the words, Fuxian Island. When he was in Ongquangsung, his master and Wu Baoru each gave him a sword. This was the third sword. After he got his title, he had one less worry and was in the mood to look at the scenery around him. When he arrived at Penglai Pavilion, he saw an acquaintance that he hadn't seen for a long time. It was Qianqing, who brought him to Fuxian Island. He waved his hand and shouted, "Martial Uncle Qing." Qianqing was slightly startled. When he saw who it was, he smiled and said, "So it's Yu Qianqiu." He glanced at the long sword in Yu Qianqiu's hand and said, "Congratulations on successfully building your foundation." The scene of him being surrounded by dozens of elders in the past appeared in front of him. Yu Qianqiu smiled and asked, "Martial Uncle Qing, why are you here?" "I'm just an external affairs disciple. What business can I have? I still have to run between Fuxian Island and the 100 Flowers Valley." Qianqing shook his head. The two of them chatted for a long time. In the end, Qianqing had something to do and had to leave. Yu Qianqiu remembered that he had promised Ling Feng and the others that he would give each of them a storage bag. So, he said, "Martial Uncle Qing, take care. Yu Qianqiu still has a favor to ask of you." Qianqing said straightforwardly, "Say it. What is it?" After Yu Qianqiu calculated in his heart, he said, I need Martial Uncle Cheng to help me buy 5 storage bags from the 100 Flowers Valley. Is that convenient? You mean buy 5 storage bags? Chen Gingxing looked at him with a bit of difficulty. It wasn't that he didn't want to help, but 5 storage bags wasn't a small amount of money. A storage bag with the capacity of 1 room would cost 1 high-grade spirit stone. These 5 storage bags would cost at least 5 high-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu had just reached foundation establishment. How much money could he have? He didn't have that much money to pay for it. Yu Qianqiu seemed to see through his thoughts. He took out 10 high-grade spirit stones from the storage bag and handed them to him. Buy me 5 storage bags with the capacity of 1 room. Chen Gingxing looked at the spirit stones in his hand and was stunned. He didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to have so many spirit stones. He quickly said, It's too much. I only need 5 high-grade spirit stones. He was about to return 5. Yu Qianqiu blocked it with his hand and said with a smile, I am indebted to Martial Uncle for thinking so highly of me. These spirit stones can be considered as money for Martial Uncle's wine. Just take it. In the future, there will inevitably be times when I need Martial Uncle's help. I hope Martial Uncle won't refuse. Chen Gingxing pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, You are. Forget it, I'm too lazy to talk to you. Just take it as I've accepted your bribe. After I buy the things, I'll go straight to the alchemy pavilion to find you. Just take it as taking the money to run errands. He put away the spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. It was no wonder that this uncle master was someone who spent a lot of time outside. He saw through Yu Qianqiu's scheme of using money to win people's hearts. However, this person was truly worth befriending. Just based on the fact that Yu Qianqiu was at the completion level and didn't put on airs like others, Yu Qianqiu was certain. The two of them smiled and parted ways, going about their own business. Chapter 91. After settling the matter, he walked towards the direction of the alchemy pavilion. Along the way, he occasionally encountered disciples who hadn't reached the foundation building realm. When they saw him carrying a sword on his back, they all saluted him. It felt really good. When he returned to the top of the alchemy pavilion, the story between him and Yan Shu had already spread like wildfire in the alchemy pavilion. Many people recognized him. When the disciples who hadn't reached the foundation building realm saw him carrying a sword on his back, they all called him Martial Uncle. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded at them one by one. He thought to himself, it seems like Yan Shu really isn't popular. Speak of the devil, and you'll see him. Yan Shu was standing at the entrance of the main hall. When he saw him carrying a sword on his back, his expression was uncertain. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to pretend he didn't see him and directly return to his courtyard, but he remembered that his master said he could enter the main hall whenever he wanted. He also wanted to see what the alchemy pavilion's main hall looked like, so he walked towards Yan Shu and waved at him from afar. Martial Uncle Yan. It was said that when these two met, there would be a good show to watch. Many disciples looked in their direction, waiting for something to happen. Yan Shu indifferently replied with a "N." Yu Qianqiu asked, Is my master inside? Elder Guan is concocting pills. It's best if you don't disturb him. Yan Shu said. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, I won't. I'm just going to see him. After saying that, he didn't care whether Yan Shu agreed or not and walked inside. Yan Shu's cheeks twitched. He gritted his teeth in anger, but there was nothing he could do. He could enter and leave the main hall whenever he wanted because Elder Guan personally said so. Originally, it was a good thing that Yu Qianqiu returned to the alchemy pavilion. If he was given a dangerous job to do, he would be killed sooner or later. Who knew that Elder Guan, who usually didn't care about such things, would personally make arrangements for him. Yan Shu had no choice but to wait for the right opportunity. The disciples outside the palace did not see what they had imagined, and they were all a little disappointed. The main hall of the alchemy pavilion was quite spacious, but unfortunately, there were not many people around. There were 2 underground entrances on both sides of the main hall. Yu Qianqiu chose an entrance and walked down. Not long after, he could feel the temperature rising. As he walked further, a huge underground space appeared in front of him. The ground was excavated flat, and everyone seemed to be very busy. There were many caves around it, and a faint red light could be seen coming out of them. Clearly, like the secret room by the sea, this was a place for alchemy. I wonder which secret chamber is mastering. Yu Qianqiu picked a disciple who hadn't reached the foundation building realm and asked him about it. After that disciple bowed and told him where Guan Weiwu was, Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and let him go. It felt good to be a teacher. Walking towards the largest pill room, he saw Guan Weiwu, who was completely focused on refining pills. Master. Yu Qianqiu bowed. Guan Weiwu turned his head and smiled. Why are you here? Yu Qianqiu's face was full of sincerity. I haven't seen Master for a day, and I miss you, so I came to see Master. Guan Weiwu stroked his messy beard with satisfaction and said with a smile, Master is currently refining a pill that can recover one's yuan qi. Go play on the side first, I'll talk to you later. After saying that, he once again focused his attention on the pill furnace. Oh. Yu Qianqiu nodded obediently, but he was a little depressed. His disciple came all the way here to flatter him, but he told him to go play on the side. That was too rude. What he didn't know was that Guan Weiwu treated him very well. If it was someone else who came to disturb him at this time, he would have already chased them away. Yu Qianqiu looked around the alchemy room. Apart from being a little big, there was nothing special about it. TSK, there was a large pile of spirit herbs in the corner. There were really a lot of them. As expected of the treatment of the alchemy pavilion's principal elder. He had stayed in the 10,000 fragrance garden for a long time, so he was no stranger to spirit herbs. Looking around, he felt bored. He wanted to go back but was afraid it would be rude. He wanted to greet his master but was afraid that his master would be unhappy. He could only stand on the side and stare blankly at the pill furnace. Bang! The sound awakened Yu Qianqiu, who was in a daze. The fragrance of pills filled the air, and a group of shadows jumped out from the top of the furnace. Guan Weiwu raised his palm and sucked in all the pills. He held them in his hand and examined them. He shook his head and sighed. Yu Qianqiu was also a person with some experience in alchemy. He couldn't help but walk over to see what kind of pills his master was refining. Guan Weiwu counted the 20 pills in his hands. 13 of them were white and sparkling, looking very beautiful, while the other 7 were black, burnt and ugly. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was strange. How could a furnace of pills produce 2 different colors? He had never encountered such a thing when he was refining the building foundation pills. He couldn't help but ask, Master, what kind of pill are you refining? Guan Weiwu looked at Yu Qianqiu and was slightly stunned. He was the disciple of a dignified alchemy pavilion elder, but he didn't even know what kind of pill it was. It was really embarrassing. It was all his fault. He had never taught his disciple anything before, so he felt ashamed. He said pleasantly, It's a qi returning pill for cultivators above the building foundation stage to recover their vitality. From this month onwards, you will also be given 1 qi returning pill every month. Damn it, I only get 1 every month, what kind of vitality can I recover? Yu Qianqiu wasn't interested in it. He pointed at the pill in his hand and asked. Master, then why are there black and white pills in this pill? Guan Weiwu shook his head and sighed, the white ones are completed pills, and the black ones are wasted pills. Sigh. After refining the chi returning pill for so many years, it's a pity that the success rate can't be increased. The rate of wasted pills is too high. A furnace of 20 pills will inevitably have 6 or 7 wasted pills. In the entire Fuxian Island, only the chi returning pill is used in large quantities. Such a high rate of wasted pills makes one's heart ache. With that said, he removed the wasted pills in his hand and kept the completed pills. He went to the corner of the alchemy room and picked up a few spiritual herbs. He put them into the furnace and continued the trial. Chi returning pill. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing at the side, vaguely felt that he had seen this name somewhere before. It seemed like other than the pill recipe jade disc, it was impossible to see it anywhere else. Anyway, when Guan Weiwu was refining pills, he wouldn't pay attention to him. Yu Qianqiu reached into his storage bag and grabbed the pill recipe jade disc. He injected his divine sense to check. He had only seen the pill recipe on the 3rd level of the jade disc. It should be in here. His divine sense entered the 3rd level and checked through the many pill recipes. As expected, he found the name Chi returning pill. After memorizing the name and appearance of the spiritual herbs and the refining method, he withdrew his divine sense. Thinking back to the spiritual herbs that his master had just grabbed, they were no different from the ones in his mind. How could it be a wasted pill? Could it be that his master's refining method was wrong? He was an old hand at refining pills. It shouldn't be possible, right? In his experience of refining pills, he didn't have the concept of a wasted pill because he had never encountered one. Thinking of this, he had an urge to refine a furnace. If he could successfully refine it, it meant that there was indeed a problem with his master's refining method. At the same time, it also meant that the refining method on the pill recipe jade disc was indeed extraordinary. Even an alchemy fanatic could be compared to it. What kind of concept was that? Yu Qianqiu was vaguely excited. He couldn't wait to give it a try. Unfortunately, there was no place for him to refine pills. Later, I'll ask my master to take a look. Seeing that Guan Weiwu still needed some time to refine the pills, he walked to the corner of the alchemy room and picked up a set of spiritual herbs for refining chi returning pills. Thinking about how he had failed many times when refining the building foundation pill, it was better to prepare a few more sets. He picked up another 3 sets, making a total of 4 sets and placed them on the ground. Then, he quietly stood to the side. When his master's furnace of pills was ready, he would open his mouth and ask for a place to refine pills. Chapter 92. Yu Qianqiu felt a little drowsy as he smelled the aroma of the various spirit herbs in the pill room. Just as he yawned, he heard a ping sound as the lid of the pill furnace opened. A fragrant aroma assailed his nostrils. Yu Qianqiu wiped his face and woke up. He saw that Master Guan Weiwu had already collected the pills. "Master, how is it?" Yu Qianqiu walked over and asked. Guan Weiwu looked at the 20 black and white pills in his hand and frowned. He shook his head and said, "I changed the method, but it still doesn't work. This time there are actually 8 waste pills." He then removed the black waste pills in his hand. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, "Master, I have a favor to ask of you." Guan Weiwu put the finished pills into his storage bag and asked, "What is it?" Yu Qianqiu ran over and picked up the 4 sets of spirit herbs on the ground. He laughed and said, "Master's every move reflects the style of a grandmaster. Disciple's heart is itching and I am very envious. I also want to try it out. Master, can you give Disciple a pill room and let Disciple try and see what it's like to concoct pills?" Guan Weiwu, who had just concocted a batch of pills, was unhappy because the results were not good. But when he heard his disciple say that he had the style of a grandmaster, he couldn't help but stroke his beard. In the entire cultivation world, who didn't know the name Pill Addict, Guan Weiwu? If he claimed to be second in alchemy skills, who would dare claim to be first? He didn't think that even his disciple, who didn't know alchemy, could see that he had the style of a grandmaster. But what he said was the truth. This disciple of his was an honest and reliable person. Guan Weiwu looked at Yu Qianqiu with more and more admiration. Yu Qianqiu carefully smiled. He didn't know that his casual words of flattery made his master feel so good. He was just flattering him out of habit. You also want to concoct pills? Guan Weiwu stared at the 4 sets of spirit grass in his hands. They were clearly the spirit grass needed to refine the qi returning pill. Guan Weiwu thought to himself, this disciple of mine really has a bit of talent in alchemy. He only took a glance at the prescription I picked up and he actually remembered it. That's right, Master is the head elder of the alchemy pavilion, his alchemy skills are unparalleled in this world. As a disciple, with such a good opportunity to learn, how could I let it go? Even if I'm stupid, I still have to give it a try. In the future, when people find out that I'm your direct disciple, if they ask, I can at least say that I've refined pills before. I can't possibly say that my master is the head elder of the alchemy pavilion and that I haven't even touched a furnace before. Master, do you think I'm right? Yu Qianqiu said sincerely. Yes. Guan Weiwu nodded. If word got out that the pill addict's direct disciple didn't know how to refine pills, it would be a joke. He would definitely lose face. Furthermore, the spirit herbs used to refine the qi returning pill weren't very precious spirit herbs. If he tried it out, he might be able to learn something. All right. Take these 4 sets of spirit herbs to broaden your horizons and experience the refining process of the spirit herbs in the furnace. If it's not enough, come to me for more. When I'm free, I'll teach you a few alchemy techniques. After Guan Weiwu finished speaking, he shouted towards the outside, Yang Qian. When you're free. Once you see a furnace, you can't even walk. Who knows when you'll be free? Yu Qianqiu smiled in his heart and said respectfully, Thank you, Master, for fulfilling my wish. After a while, an old man hurriedly ran in and bowed, Elder Guan, what can I do for you? This person was the manager of the alchemy pavilion. His cultivation had reached the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Yu Qianqiu had heard of his name before, so he immediately bowed and said, Manager Yang. He addressed Yang Qianqiu this way to avoid conflict with the rules of Fuxian Island. According to the rules, he had to address Yang Qianqiu as Grandmaster, but in front of his master, it was naturally inconvenient to do so. In fact, when other people encountered such a situation, they would also do the same. Guan Weiwu pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, This is my disciple, Yu Qianqiu, arrange an alchemy pavilion for him. Understood, Elder Guan. Yang Qian smiled at Yu Qianqiu and said, Come with me. Guan Weiwu also waved his hand at him and said, Go. Go. Be more attentive. Yu Qianqiu thanked Guan Weiwu and left with Yang Qian with the spirit herbs. Outside, Yang Qian looked at Yu Qianqiu. Guan Weiwu had accepted more than 10 disciples, but in the end, some died, and some joined other masters. The reason was naturally because after Guan Weiwu excitedly accepted disciples, he did not care about them anymore. Some disciples even met their master for the first time and did not see him a second time. This Yu Qianqiu was regarded so highly by Guan Weiwu, it was really unusual. Yang Qian hesitated for a while, then led Yu Qianqiu to an empty alchemy pavilion and asked the latter, Yu Qianqiu, what do you think of this place? If you don't like it, we can change to another one. Yu Qianqiu looked inside. As long as it could be used for alchemy, there was no need to care about so many things. He bowed and said, Thank you, Grandmaster Yang, this one will do, there is no need to trouble yourself. That's good, call me if there is anything, I still have something to do. I will leave first. Yang Qian smiled and said. Yu Qianqiu sent him out. Returning to the alchemy pavilion, he stepped on a protruding stone on the ground. There was a sound under the alchemy furnace, and a red light overflowed. The room instantly lit up, and the temperature gradually rose. The earth fire burned the alchemy furnace. Yu Qianqiu took out a portion of the spirit herbs and threw the remaining 3 portions into his storage bag. After the alchemy furnace finished preheating, he opened the lid and threw the spirit herbs inside, then quickly closed it. His divine sense guided the air flow and quickly refined the spirit herbs. With this test, Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised to find that his divine sense's control over the air flow was 1,000 times easier. Compared to refining foundation building pills, he had to use spirit stones to restore his divine sense. No wonder it was said that alchemy was only suitable after the foundation building stage. The difference was simply too big. Different alchemy furnaces had differences in alchemy, and it had little to do with whether he was used to it or not. This alchemy furnace was obviously much worse than the one Ma Zhouge used. The heat inside was not evenly distributed, and it was very easy for it to suddenly go berserk. Fortunately, he had honed it in pain, so he was very skilled in using his divine sense to control the air flow. No matter how violent the air flow was, or how difficult it was to control, his divine sense would guide, block, or draw a small circle, and it would effortlessly tame the hot air flow. Whatever he wanted it to do, it would obediently listen. This was the first time Yu Qianqiu enjoyed the feeling of controlling the air to his heart's content. That kind of smooth and comfortable feeling was too refreshing, and he was proud of himself. Little guy, you want to fight with me? According to the method of refining the qi returning pill in his mind, the several spirit herb essences separated or combined, smoothly circulating inside the alchemy furnace, drawing beautiful arcs. Sometimes it was fast, sometimes it was slow, sometimes it was dancing inside the furnace, and sometimes it was separated and combined. The beauty of this movement and stillness made even Yu Qianqiu himself intoxicated. Inside the furnace, there was a light blue crystal clear, and the largest spirit herb essence slowly floated in the center. Around it, there were several crystal clear balls of other colors circling around it. A gust of air blew past, and the crystal clear balls became bigger and bigger. Yu Qianqiu's divine sense moved, combine. The flying crystal clear balls suddenly became like meteorites hitting the earth, and one by one, they collided with the crystal blue ball in the center. In an instant, there was only a ball of crystal clear balls of multicolored light left inside the furnace. Yu Qianqiu's divine sense moved again, separate. Under the control of the airflow, the multicolored crystal in the center of the furnace threw out drops of water like a spinning umbrella. As a result, it disappeared without a trace, but it formed 20 much smaller, multicolored crystal clear balls in the furnace. Under the control of the airflow, they rotated in the center in an orderly manner, receiving the baptism of the highest temperature in the furnace. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. This was the first time he used his divine sense to control more than 20 crystals at the same time. However, after his cultivation reached the foundation establishment stage, it was obvious that he had been worried for nothing. Checking the movement inside the furnace, he felt that there shouldn't be any more problems. Chapter 93. After a long time, the spiritual herb essence that had been divided into more than 20 balls shrunk into white pills the size of quail eggs. Done. Yu Qianqiu slapped open the lid of the furnace, and the pills inside were quickly ejected by the hot air. Yu Qianqiu quickly bounced up and opened up his shirt to grab all the pills. He didn't have a cultivation like Guan Weiwu, who could suck them all out with a wave of his hand. After landing, Yu Qianqiu counted carefully. There were 20 pills, not one less, and there were no black pills like the ones his master had refined. However, the colors seemed different from the ones his master had refined. He picked one up and took a closer look. It was fragrant, sparkling white, smooth, and glossy. There was a layer of white light on it, and it seemed to look better than the ones his master had refined. That wasn't right. With his beginner's skills, how could he refine it better than his master? Could it be that it looked good, but the medicinal effects were much worse? Yu Qianqiu suddenly thought of the foundation establishment pills he had refined. Chen Feng had used 2 to successfully build his foundation, and Guan Yu had used 7. Guan Yu had also used 3 on supporting Immortal Island, so that was 10 in total. Yu Qianqiu was even more exaggerated, using 12. Could it be that this had nothing to do with the medicinal effects? No way. He had to take it to his master. Maybe his master would know what the problem was. Yu Qianqiu lifted the hem of his shirt and walked to the largest pill room in the center, puzzled. When he entered, Guan Weiwu was holding the pills in his hand, shaking his head and sighing. Clearly, he had refined another batch of pills that didn't go his way. Master. Yu Qianqiu called out. Guan Weiwu didn't even raise his head and said, "Are there not enough spiritual herbs? Go and get them yourself." "No, master. I refined a batch of qi recovery pills. I don't know how it turned out, so I brought it here for you to take a look." Yu Qianqiu said embarrassedly. Guan Weiwu raised his head in surprise and said, "You refined a batch of qi recovery pills? So fast. Let me have a look." He didn't believe it. He didn't know anything. How could he concoct pills for the first time? Yu Qianqiu lifted the hem of his robe and spread it out. There were 20 pearls lying quietly in his robe, waiting for someone to pick them. Guan Weiwu first glanced at it. With his experience, he could naturally tell the quality of the pill at a glance. Then, he widened his eyes in disbelief. Damn it. Sure enough, there was a problem with my refinement, but it shouldn't have shocked you to this extent. If you have something to say, just say it. I will humbly accept it. Yu Qianqiu smiled unnaturally and said, "Master, what's the problem?" This disciple is puzzled and hopes that Master can correct me. Guan Weiwu's hands trembled as he reached out and pinched one out. He looked at it over and over again, then placed it in front of his nose and sniffed it. Finally, he said with a serious expression, "Did you really make this yourself?" "I used a few sets of spirit herbs to refine it." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Damn it. Don't tell me you're afraid that I'll waste more spirit herbs. If I say I used 1 set, you might ask me to bring back the extra. Damn it. Don't be too stingy as a master. I'm even more stingy than you. How can it be so easy to take back something that's in my hands? Yu Qianqiu said with a little embarrassment, "Look at what you're saying." Naturally, this disciple made it myself. This disciple can fool anyone, but I wouldn't dare to fool Master. That used 4 sets of spirit herbs to barely make 1 furnace. Hearing that he used 4 sets, Guan Weiwu revealed an expression as if he had expected it. He grabbed all the qi returning pills that Yu Qianqiu had refined and put them into his own storage bag. He turned to the corner and picked out a few more sets of spirit herbs for refining qi returning pills. He said to Yu Qianqiu, "Let's go. Bring me to the place where you were refining pills." Seeing that his master was not going to pursue the matter of using too many spirit herbs, but was going to personally instruct him, Guan Weiwu nodded excitedly and led the way. As soon as the 2 of them walked out, they immediately attracted a lot of attention. Those who passed by saluted and said, "Elder Guan." Guan Weiwu's mind was preoccupied with other things, so he didn't pay attention to anyone. He only knew how to follow his disciple. Young Qian, who was in the middle of directing people, saw this. He didn't know what was going on. Could it be that there was a problem with the place that he had arranged for Yu Qianqiu? He hurriedly followed to check. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the alchemy room and said, "Master, this is the room." Guan Weiwu nodded and said, "Let's go in and have a look." Young Qian, who followed, thought that there really was a problem with the alchemy room. But there shouldn't be a problem. It had been used for thousands of years, and no one had ever said that there was a problem. How could there be a problem when Elder Guan's disciple came? Thinking about Guan Weiwu's domineering attitude when it came to alchemy, if anyone dared to make a mistake in alchemy, they would definitely be killed by him. Otherwise, how could he have the title of pill addict? Young Qian's heart tightened. Please don't let anything bad happen. He hurriedly followed. When Yu Qianzhou went out, the earth fire under the furnace was not turned off. When he came in, it was still the same. Guan Weiwu circled the furnace twice and carefully looked at it. He didn't see anything wrong with it, although it wasn't as good as his own furnace. He pointed to the furnace and asked, "Did you use this furnace to refine?" "Yes, master." Yu Qianzhou nodded. Young Qian, who had followed him in, also looked at it carefully. He didn't see anything wrong. Guan Weiwu carried a pile of spiritual herbs and handed a portion to Yu Qianzhou, saying, "Refine it again according to the method just now. Put your heart into it." Yu Qianzhou was delighted. Master really wanted to personally guide him in alchemy. He hurriedly said, "Yes." He skillfully threw in the spiritual herbs, closed the furnace lid, and threw himself into the process of refining the qi returning pill. Seeing that his disciple had already entered the state of alchemy, Guan Weiwu wanted to insert his divine sense into the furnace to see how his disciple was refining. But he was afraid of disturbing his disciple, so he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Putting away the spiritual herbs, he took out the qi returning pill that Yu Qianzhou had just refined and examined it in his hand. Young Qian found it strange. What were these master and disciple doing? He walked over to Guan Weiwu, wanting to ask what was going on. Only to see Guan Weiwu anxiously waving his hand at him, gesturing for him to be quiet. Young Qian was so frightened that he stood there with him, not daring to move. Yu Qianzhou had the experience of refining the qi returning pill from the previous furnace. This time, he was even more at ease with his control. He was performing a wonderful game of divine sense control inside the furnace. Unfortunately, there was no one else to see it. After a long time, Yu Qianzhou finally opened his eyes. Just as he waved his hand to open the furnace lid, he heard Guan Weiwu shout, "Come." He raised his hand and sucked in the medicinal pills that had been ejected. He compared the pile of pills he had sucked in with the original one in his hand. After looking at it, he found that it really was the same method of refining the same medicinal pills. Moreover, there were no less than 20 pills, not a single one was a waste. Yu Qianzhou stopped, walked over and asked, "Master, is there a problem?" Guan Weiwu snorted and shook his head. He stuffed all the medicinal pills in his hand into his storage bag and shouted to Yu Qianzhou and Yang Qian, "You two are not allowed to disturb me while I'm refining pills." Seeing how serious he was, the two of them nodded repeatedly. Guan Weiwu rolled up his sleeves, took out some spiritual herbs, and directly threw them into the furnace to begin refining. Yu Qianzhou knew that this refining would take a lot of time. He stood to the side and quietly recovered his yuan qi and slightly damaged divine sense. He then refined 2 furnaces of pills, more or less exhausted, but compared to when he was refining the building foundation pills, he did not know how many times better. Young Qian, who was standing to the side, was shocked. He had seen the furnace of qi returning pills that Yu Qianzhou had refined. That shape, that luster, and that indistinct pill halo. He had stayed in the alchemy pavilion for nearly 100 years, so he could naturally distinguish good pills from bad ones. There were no less than 20 pills. Not a single one was a waste pill, and there was even a pill halo that only top-grade medicinal pills had. Heavens! It was actually refined by Guan Weiwu's disciple. How was this possible? Even Guan Weiwu did not have this level. Chapter 94. Although it was just an ordinary qi replenishing pill, young Qian knew what it represented. There were many Foundation establishment stage disciples on the supporting Immortal Island, so they needed a lot of qi returning pills. The 10,000 fragrance garden often didn't have enough qi returning pills and spirit herbs. Furthermore, in order to appease the quarrels between the other sects, the sect had to sell a considerable amount of qi returning pills every year. However, the proportion of waste pills was too high. More than half of the pills in a furnace were waste pills. Only an expert alchemist like Guan Weiwu could control the proportion to less than half. If he could refine a full furnace of pills like Yu Qianchou's, and it was a top-grade pill with pill halo, he could sell it for at least double the price. The benefits to the sect would be unimaginable. Young Qian finally understood why Guan Weiwu had been so reckless just now. Pang! The lid of the cauldron popped up, and Guan Weiwu opened his 5 claws, sucking all the medicinal pills into his palm. Yu Qianchou and Young Qian walked over to watch. In his wide palm, 7 out of the 20 pills were useless. Yu Qianchou and Young Qian glanced at each other. Guan Weiwu suddenly raised his head to the sky and let out a long howl, causing all the busy people in the alchemy room to look in his direction. It was hard to tell if he was happy or sad. The 20 pills in his hand, regardless of whether they were good or bad, were all crushed into powder and thrown to the side. Young Qian understood Guan Weiwu's current mood. He had been refining pills for his entire life, yet he could not compare to his disciple who had just entered the sect. Yu Qianchou, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. He didn't know what was wrong with his master. Wasn't it just a few wasted pills? Is it worth blaming yourself like this? You see, I didn't even refine a single batch of pills, but you're still very calm. Sigh. This master was really an alchemy fanatic, rotten wood that could not be carved. Guan Weiwu grabbed Yu Qianchou's arm and shouted, "Come with me." Finished speaking, he dragged Yu Qianchou and ran. F***ck me. You pinched me so hard, it hurts. Yu Qianchou grimaced in pain as he ran after her. Young Qian followed suit. The 3 of them jogged all the way to Guan Weiwu's personal alchemy room. After entering, Guan Weiwu released Yu Qianchou's arm and said, "Yu Qianchou, refine another furnace according to the previous method. I want to infuse my divine sense into the furnace to see how you refine. You don't need to worry about my divine sense, I won't disturb you. You just focus on refining your pills, do you understand?" Yu Qianchou rubbed his sore arm. He was also touched by his master's attentive guidance. He thought to himself, how can I, Yu Qianchou, be able to meet 2 masters who treat me like this? Sigh. He was so moved that tears flowed down his face. He would never forget this kindness in his life. Taking the spirit grass from Guan Weiwu, he nodded and said, "Master, I understand." Then he put in the spirit grass and began to refine again. TSK. The furnace of the alchemy pavilion's principal elder was different. The heat was uniform and strong. It was better than Ma Zhugu's furnace. Yu Qianchou sighed in his heart. Then he noticed that there were 2 more strands of divine sense inside the furnace. One was his master's, and the other one. Needless to say, there were only 3 people in the alchemy room. The remaining one was definitely Yang Qian's. Guan Weiwu also noticed the extra divine sense and glared at Yang Qian. The latter smiled awkwardly and pursed his lips at the pill furnace. The 2 of them closed their eyes and focused on the situation inside the pill furnace. When the 2 of them looked, they were shocked. They discovered that Yu Qianchou wasn't using his divine sense to directly refine the spirit grass essence. Instead, he was controlling the heat flow inside the furnace to control the spirit grass essence. The 2 of them had been refining pills for many years, but they had never seen someone refine pills like this. Since ancient times, who in the cultivation world didn't use their divine sense to refine pills? The only exception was those ordinary people who claimed to be able to refine pills. In reality, what they refined was just some ointment. After taking it out and rolling it into a ball, they dried it and used it as a pill. This was completely different from refining pills. Even if they used real materials to refine pills, 90% of the world's essence would be gone. Yu Qianzhou's method was unheard of and unseen, but it was a breath of fresh air. They didn't know that Yu Qianzhou had already begun to learn alchemy when he was still in the qi refining stage. Based on his cultivation at that time, his divine sense couldn't directly control anything inside the furnace, forcing him to come up with a method to use his divine sense to stir the air flow. Although he finally succeeded in learning it, the suffering and pain he suffered during the process was something that Guan Weiwu and Yang Qian couldn't understand. They also didn't know that Yu Qianzhou was stupid enough to forcibly use his divine sense to refine pills before he reached the foundation building stage. Of course, there were objective reasons for him to do so. First, he was eager to obtain the foundation building pill. Second, he listened to Yan Zixia's words. She said that Ma Jiugu said that very few people could refine pills while in the qi refining stage. Since it was very few, it meant that there was, and since there was, it meant that he could also do it. In the end, relying on a large number of spirit stones, he really did it. Third, he didn't know that the so-called few people were gifted, and their cultivation was comparable to that of the foundation building stage when they were in the qi refining stage. Fourth, he didn't know that forcibly refining like that would accidentally destroy his divine sense and turn him into an idiot. If he had known this, he would probably rather be killed than bear the result of turning into an idiot. Fifth, and also more or less related to the third reason. Although he wasn't gifted, when he was in Angquangsung, because of the help of the golden bead, he could inflate his dantian for a very long time, which allowed him to have a larger capacity of true qi than people at the same cultivation level as him. As a result, his cultivation at the late qi refining stage was indeed much stronger than that of ordinary people. Naturally, his divine sense was also much stronger, which, to a large extent, prevented him from turning into an idiot. In fact, with Yu Qianzhou's current cultivation level, he could also use the method of controlling objects with his divine sense to directly refine pills. However, he found that using the method of controlling the flow of air to refine pills was more effortless. With the help of the hot air in the furnace, it was like using 4 ounces to move 1,000 caddies, which was very effortless. Moreover, when refining pills, according to the inertia of the flow of air, the essence of the spiritual herbs would be divided and combined. Even if there were many pills, it would still be guaranteed that the medicinal properties of each pill would be evenly distributed. This was something that couldn't be achieved by using the method of controlling objects with his divine sense to forcibly separate them. That way, the medicinal properties contained in each pill would always be more or less different. It would definitely not be as uniform as the method Yu Qianzhou was using now. When the essence of the spiritual herbs in the furnace was manipulated by the flow of air by Yu Qianzhou's divine sense, it made a variety of smooth performances. All kinds of brilliant spiritual liquids danced in the furnace, drawing out a dazzling brilliance that shook people's hearts. The arcs drawn out were colorful, and the convergence was enchanting. Sometimes it was dripping, sometimes it gathered and scattered, sometimes it bloomed like a flower, and sometimes it spun and embraced. Under the simple manipulation of the flow of air by his divine sense, the spiritual liquids in the furnace slowly evolved towards their ultimate goal. Guan Weiwu and Yang Qian's divine sense inside the furnace fluctuated in disbelief at first, but soon after, they quietly enjoyed this visual feast. The faces of their bodies outside the furnace revealed intoxicated expressions. Even when the pills were completed, the two were still intoxicated. Bang! The furnace lid opened, and Yu Qianzhou used a method that was many times more clumsy than Guan Weiwu's. He jumped up and used the old method of using the hem of his long robe to cover the pills. The sound of the furnace lid opening also startled the two. The two opened their eyes and slowly exhaled a stuffy breath that they had no choice but to exhale. Yu Qianqiu lifted the hem of his robe and walked over. Scratching his head, he said, "Master, is there a big problem with the pills I've refined like this?" Guan Weiwu and Yang Qian looked at each other, shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. AI. Guan Weiwu sighed. Looking at the 20 completed pills in front of him, he reached out and picked up an energy recovery pill from his disciple's robe. His eyes blurred as he looked at the mesmerizing halo that the pill was emitting. Suddenly, he directly threw it into his mouth and swallowed it. What he had refined and what his disciple had refined were both energy recovery pills. However, after circulating his energy, the efficacy of the latter was nearly double that of the former. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.